Welcome to this exceptionally slow, deeply calming, and intentionally uneventful journey into the earliest days of ancient Rome. This is the first part of a 20-part series designed for long, quiet, sleep-friendly videos. In this episode, we will explore the very beginning of the Italian peninsula's history, focusing on gentle details, ordinary routines, and the slow rhythms of life that unfolded long before Rome became a city, a kingdom, a republic, or an empire. Thousands of years before monumental temples and marble statues appeared, the central region of Italy was a land shaped by nature's quiet persistence. Rolling hills stretched softly across the landscape, their slopes covered with grasses that swayed lightly with every breeze. The Tiber River, which would eventually play a central role in Roman identity, moved slowly and steadily through the terrain. Its surface reflected the sky, sometimes bright, sometimes faintly golden, and sometimes a calm gray under thick clouds. Along its banks, clusters of reeds whispered softly as the wind passed through them. Birds nested in the nearby trees, and small animals wandered cautiously through the underbrush. This land, long before it became home to a great civilization, was a simple place. Human life here began gradually, without dramatic moments or sudden changes. During the Neolithic period, small groups of people settled in various areas, choosing locations that provided access to water, fertile soil, and protection from the elements. These early communities lived quietly. Their homes were modest, often built from wood, clay, and thatch. Inside, families stored basic tools, grains, and handmade pottery. The pottery was functional, decorated with simple patterns that reflected the limited yet meaningful artistic expressions of the time. Each day followed a predictable rhythm. With sunrise, the community slowly came to life. People checked their fields, gathered tools, prepared food, or tended to small animals such as goats and sheep. The work was steady but not hurried. The early agricultural methods required patience more than anything else. Seeds were planted with care. Soil was turned with simple wooden or stone tools, and harvest depended entirely on the cooperation of the weather. During the daytime, people often traveled short distances to collect firewood, gather edible plants, or exchange goods with neighboring groups. These exchanges were simple and practical. Grains for pottery, animal products for stone tools, or wooden objects for dried herbs. There was no concept of money, no complex market, and no organized political structure. Everything operated through mutual needs and shared understanding. As evening approached, the sounds of the world softened. Fires were lit, producing a warm glow that filled the interiors of small huts. Families sat close, sharing food prepared with basic ingredients. The crackling of the fire created a steady background sound, and shadows moved slowly across the walls as flames flickered. Conversations were quiet, often centered on daily tasks, changes in the weather, or preparations for the next day. Life was calm, repetitive, and deeply connected to nature. Over long stretches of time, centuries, not years, these early communities gradually learned new techniques. Stone tools became sharper and more durable. Pottery became more refined. The understanding of the seasons improved, but all progress was slow and steady, unfolding at a pace almost indistinguishable within a single lifetime. Generations passed, each contributing just a small improvement to the next. Eventually, new groups began to arrive in the region. Among them were the Latins, a people who settled in the area known as Latium. They preferred to build their small communities on hills, which offered natural defense against potential threats. These hills, modest in size and gentle in slope, would become the birthplace of early Rome. There were 7 major hills, though at this early stage they were simply scattered elevations covered with trees and small clearings. The Latins lived in simple settlements consisting of round huts with wooden frames and thatched roofs. Life in these settlements remained peaceful and predictable. People woke with the light, worked throughout the day, and rested when the sun dipped below the horizon. There were no grand events that marked the passing of time, only the quiet cycles of seasons, harvests, and daily tasks. Although legends such as that of Romulus and Remus would later bring dramatic color to Rome's origins, the true early history was far more ordinary. It was defined by slow growth, patient adaptation, and the gradual formation of cultural practices. There were no armies, no kings, and no political debates. Instead, there were communities bound by shared responsibility, common needs, and the natural rhythms of the land. In this long and gentle introduction, we begin to understand that Rome, before becoming a symbol of power, was once a peaceful collection of small hilltop settlements. In the next part, we will continue to move slowly through history, exploring how these simple communities started interacting with one another, forming early traditions, and laying the subtle groundwork for the Rome that would one day emerge. In the second part of our long and deliberately calm journey into the origins of ancient Rome, we continue observing the slow, quiet development of early Latin communities. Nothing here happens quickly. Nothing arrives suddenly. Instead, history drifts gently, much like the soft breeze that once passed through the hills of Latium. The aim is not to excite the mind, but to slow it down, letting each detail settle like fine dust on a peaceful, undisturbed path. Long before Rome became a bustling city, the people of Latium lived in small, scattered settlements perched upon gentle hills. These hills, later known as the famous Seven Hills of Rome, were at this early stage simply natural elevations covered with grasses, shrubs, and patches of woodland. Families built round huts from wood, reeds, and thatch. These homes were simple, but they offered warmth, shade, and familiarity. Inside, the central hearth burned steadily, sending light smoke upward and filling the space with a soft, earthy scent. Daily life flowed with a predictable rhythm. As dawn approached, the sky slowly brightened, revealing fields that stretched outward in muted greens and browns. Families rose quietly, stirred the embers of the fire, and prepared for another slow, steady day of work. Agriculture was the foundation of life, and most people spent the daylight hours tending their small plots of land. Wheat and barley were the primary crops, and the tools used, stone blades, wooden hoes, woven baskets, reflected a world still grounded in simplicity. Farming required patience more than skill. Seeds were planted with care, and people waited, sometimes for many weeks, to see signs of growth. There was no rush, no urgency, only the steady passage of time. During warm seasons, families often worked together. If one household faced difficulties, such as poor soil, damaged tools, or sickness, neighbors quietly offered assistance. Their cooperation was not formalized by rules or political institutions. Instead, it was an organic expression of shared life. These small moments of support slowly built traditions of unity and mutual reliance. When midday approached, people rested in the shade of olive trees or beside quiet streams. The sound of running water mixed with the soft hum of insects, creating an atmosphere that encouraged long, slow breaths. Meals were simple: coarse bread, olives, dried fruits, and occasionally cheese made from goat's milk. Conversation during these breaks was unhurried. People talked about the weather, small changes in the fields, or the behavior of animals. Nothing dramatic needed to be discussed. Their world moved without abrupt turns. As generations passed, the early Latins began developing subtle social structures. Elders gained respect not through wealth or power, but through accumulated experience. When disagreements arose, usually involving grazing land or shared pathways, elders spoke calmly with all parties, finding solutions that maintained harmony. Their authority was gentle, more like guidance than command. Trade also developed gradually. Paths between settlements became smoother as the same routes were used repeatedly. These footpaths connected hilltops and valleys, winding softly across the landscape. Along them, people carried small goods, grains, simple pottery, wooden utensils, animal skins. Exchanges were made through quiet conversation, often without bargaining. Each trade strengthened bonds between communities, and each journey helped people understand the region beyond their own hill. Cultural expression grew slowly as well. Early religious rituals took place outdoors, near stones, trees, or springs believed to hold spiritual significance. Offerings of grain, bread, or small handmade objects were placed gently before these natural shrines. Rituals were calm, involving soft chanting or moments of silent reflection. These practices helped the people of Latium feel connected not only to each other, but also to the land they depended upon. Artisans emerged in small numbers. Potters improved their techniques, shaping smoother vessels and adding faint decorative lines. Woodworkers produced stronger handles for tools. Weavers created simple but functional fabrics using fibers from flax or wool. None of these crafts changed rapidly. Skills passed from parent to child, refined slightly with each generation. In the evenings, the hills grew quiet again. Families returned home, carrying baskets filled with gathered plants or tools to be repaired. The sun sank slowly, casting long shadows. Fires were rekindled, and the warm glow spread across the interiors of round huts. The crackling of wood offered a soft rhythm, and the gentle movement of flames provided a calming visual backdrop for quiet conversations. People spoke in early Latin, still a simple language at this time, filled with words rooted in nature, farming, and family life. Before sleep, some families stepped outside to observe the darkening sky. Stars appeared one by one, offering steady points of light. Without artificial brightness, the night sky felt vast and comforting. The people of Latium ended their days with a sense of continuity, knowing that tomorrow would bring the same familiar patterns. Thus, the early culture of the Latins did not appear through sudden innovations or powerful leaders. It emerged slowly, shaped by shared labor, simple rituals, and the steady passage of many uneventful years. These quiet foundations would one day support the rise of a great civilization, though no one at the time could have imagined such a future. In the next part of this long and peaceful journey, we will continue observing how these small settlements deepen their connections, forming the earliest frameworks of collective life that eventually led toward the formation of early Rome. In this third part of our slow and sleep-friendly journey through early Roman history, we continue observing the gentle development of the Latin world long before Rome became a unified city. Nothing sudden takes place here. Instead, the landscape shifts subtly over centuries as small settlements begin to recognize one another, interact, and form the earliest hints of shared identity. This quiet interconnectedness will one day become the backbone of Roman civilization, but in these early centuries it remains soft, simple, and understated. As time passed, the individual hilltop communities of Latium found themselves encountering each other more often. Paths, once nothing more than faint tracks in the grass, slowly turned into recognizable routes. These paths were shaped not by intention, but by repetition, by countless footsteps taken at unhurried paces. They curved around small clusters of trees, dipped into valleys, and climbed gently onto neighboring hills. Travelers rarely rushed. They walked steadily, carrying baskets, clay pots, or woven bags, and paused occasionally to rest beneath the shade of an oak. The air was often filled with the sounds of insects, the distant call of birds, and the soft whisper of the wind moving across the open fields. Trade, still very modest, played a quiet role in developing early connections. People exchanged simple items, bundles of grain for a clay vessel, a wooden tool for a piece of leather, dried herbs for a small woven mat. There were no markets, no bargaining stalls, and no coins. Each exchange was personal and familiar, conducted through calm conversation. These interactions strengthened trust between families and neighboring hills, slowly weaving the region into a soft network of cooperation. Agriculture remained the center of life, and much of this cooperation took place in the fields. During planting and harvest seasons, workloads increased, and families often helped each other. Several households might work side by side, gently turning the soil, placing seeds into the earth, or collecting ripened crops. The rhythm of these communal tasks was steady and soothing. As tools scraped the ground and baskets filled with grain, people shared thoughts about the weather, the growth of plants, or the behavior of livestock. The repeated actions, combined with the predictability of the seasons, created a comforting sense of continuity. During the warmer months, gatherings between communities became more common. These were not festivals in the later Roman sense, no grand spectacles, no organized events, but small, friendly meetings. Families brought food to share, perhaps loaves of coarse bread, olives, nuts, and small pieces of cheese. People sat beneath trees or around simple outdoor fires. Conversations drifted slowly, free from urgency. Children played at the edges of these gatherings, stacking stones or chasing each other through the grass. Elders told quiet stories or offered gentle advice about farming cycles or the movement of animals. Religious practices also helped the communities bond gradually. Early Latin spirituality was deeply tied to nature. Trees, springs, and stones were believed to hold spiritual significance. Between hills, small sacred spots emerged where families from different settlements offered grains, flowers, or small crafted objects. The rituals were brief and peaceful. People participated not in search of dramatic miracles, but out of respect for the natural forces they believed shaped their lives. These shared sacred spaces gave different settlements a sense of belonging to a greater landscape. Over generations, subtle forms of leadership started to develop. Certain individuals, usually older members of the community, became known for fair judgment or thoughtful guidance. When disputes arose, such as disagreements over grazing areas or access to water, these elders met quietly with families involved. Their decisions were not enforced by threats or power, but by the calm authority of experience. Their goal was always the same: to restore balance and prevent conflict from disturbing the slow, predictable rhythms of life. Craftsmanship advanced gradually as well. Potters began making smoother vessels, sometimes adding gentle, curved patterns. Woodworkers crafted stronger handles and simple decorations on tools. Weavers produced cloth with slightly finer textures. These changes were modest but meaningful, marking the slow refinement of everyday life. Skills passed from generation to generation, each adding a small improvement, creating a gentle evolution of technology and technique. The environment shaped everything. The climate of Latium offered mild winters and warm summers, guiding planting cycles and influencing daily routines. The Tiber River, flowing steadily through the region, became a point of reference for travel, trade, and rest. Its calm waters reflected the sky and brought a sense of stability. People often sat along its banks to clear their minds, watching the surface ripple gently as small fish moved below. As evening approached, families returned home to their round huts. The glow of firelight filled the interiors, casting slow shifting shadows on the walls. Pots simmered with simple stews made from grains, vegetables, or legumes. The air filled with the quiet crackling of burning wood. People spoke softly about the events of the day or the tasks awaiting them tomorrow. Outside, darkness settled slowly over the hills, and the sky filled with stars. This early interconnectedness did not create a unified nation or a powerful city, not yet, but it planted the seeds of belonging, cooperation, and cultural familiarity. These foundations, built slowly over generations, would eventually support the rise of organized leadership, communal decision-making, and the formation of early Rome. In the next part, we will continue our calm journey and explore how these small communities began to take the earliest steps toward forming a more structured society, laying the very first stones of the Roman kingdom. In this fourth part of our slow and gentle journey through early Roman history, we begin to observe the earliest signs of leadership and organization within the Latin communities. Nothing happens quickly, nothing is dramatic. Instead, the process of creating structure unfolds gradually, like water carving small channels through soft earth over centuries. These modest beginnings will one day lead to the formation of the Roman kingdom, but for now, everything develops quietly, without fanfare or urgency. The early settlements on the hills remain largely independent, yet patterns of cooperation became increasingly noticeable. Families who had once worked alone in their own plots began coordinating more regularly for planting, harvesting, and maintaining shared pathways. Elders who had long offered guidance in local disputes began to play slightly larger roles. Their authority remained informal, resting on experience, patience, and the respect of neighbors. When disagreements arose, they convened quiet councils to discuss solutions. No one raised their voice. Decisions were made slowly, deliberately, with consideration for every family involved. Gradually, a sense of hierarchy emerged. Certain individuals became recognized for their wisdom, reliability, or organizational skill. They helped schedule communal tasks, mediated disputes, and even represented multiple settlements in conversations with neighboring communities. These early leaders were not kings, generals, or politicians in the later sense. Their influence was soft and subtle, grounded in personal reputation rather than formal titles or laws. Daily life continued to revolve around agriculture. Fields of wheat, barley, and legumes stretched gently over the hills and valleys. Families worked from dawn to dusk, turning the soil, sowing seeds, and tending crops. Livestock, including goats, sheep, and cattle, required careful attention. The pace was never rushed. Time passed in measured increments, and the cycles of the sun and seasons dictated the rhythm of work. Even during communal activities, the work proceeded steadily, with pauses to rest, eat, and observe the world around them. The hills were alive with soft, repetitive sounds, the scrape of wooden hoes, the rustle of straw, the low calls of animals, and the quiet murmur of conversation. Trade and exchange between settlements continued slowly. Small quantities of grain, woven goods, pottery, and simple tools moved between families. No coins were used. Bartering remained informal, friendly, and consistent. Journeys along the slowly worn paths allowed villagers to observe one another and develop trust. These walks were not hurried. Travelers paused by streams to drink, adjusted baskets of goods, or watched children playing along the way. Even these ordinary movements contributed to a growing sense of interconnectedness. Religion also played a role in fostering cohesion. Families continued to honor natural spirits, ancestral forces, and simple household deities. Small shrines, marked by stacked stones, carved wooden posts, or symbolic arrangements of offerings, dotted the hills and valleys. Quiet ceremonies accompanied planting, harvest, and other seasonal transitions. People spoke softly to the spirits, whispered thanks for favorable rains or abundant crops, and left simple tokens of gratitude. These practices reinforced a shared understanding of the world and strengthened ties between neighboring families. Artisans and craftsmen contributed subtly to early community life. Potters experimented with more durable clay, slightly refined shapes, and minimal decorative patterns. Weavers produced fabrics of consistent thickness. Woodworkers made sturdier handles for tools and small ornamental carvings. Changes were incremental, often imperceptible from one generation to the next. Over long stretches of time, however, these improvements added texture to everyday life and enriched cultural experience. Evenings brought predictable calm. Fires were rekindled in round huts, filling interiors with soft, flickering light. Families gathered for meals prepared from grains, vegetables, and occasionally small animals raised or hunted by the household. Smoke drifted lazily toward roof openings, carrying a comforting scent of warmth and sustenance. Conversations were quiet, reflecting on the day's activities and preparations for tomorrow. The darkened hills outside were serene, dotted with distant fires and faint stars appearing in the night sky. Through these centuries, the Latin settlements gradually developed the faint outlines of organization, hierarchy, and mutual cooperation. These early foundations would one day support the political and social structures of the Roman kingdom. Yet in this period, everything remained slow, subtle, and deeply tied to daily rhythms and natural cycles. Life was steady, continuous, and remarkably consistent, building strength through repetition and calm continuity rather than dramatic events. As this part concludes, we see the quiet emergence of the first leaders, modest yet important, guiding communities through slow, peaceful growth. In the next part of our journey, we will explore how these networks of settlements begin to consolidate even further, establishing early alliances, coordinated rituals, and the beginnings of what may one day be called Roman governance. In this fifth part of our slow, deliberate journey through early Roman history, we continue to observe how the small Latin communities began forming gentle alliances and strengthening ties with one another. Nothing sudden occurs. No dramatic wars are fought. No kings decree powerful laws. Instead, the process is subtle, quiet, and measured. These early connections would eventually lay the groundwork for larger political and social structures. But at this stage, life is calm, repetitive, and deeply tied to the natural rhythms of the land. As the generations passed, families living on separate hills started interacting more frequently. Paths that had once been faint and uneven gradually became familiar roads. Travelers moving from one hilltop to another began to recognize not only the terrain, but also the people along the way. Small greetings, shared meals, or the simple exchange of goods created bonds between communities. Nothing about these interactions was urgent. Each meeting reinforced a sense of shared experience and slowly built trust across the hills. Trade remained modest but meaningful. Bundles of grain were carried for pottery or woven goods. Simple tools, small wooden objects, and occasional animal products exchanged hands without rush. These exchanges were conducted quietly, with polite conversation and careful attention to fairness. Over time, repeated interactions between settlements created a network of connections that linked the region in a subtle but enduring way. People began to understand that their lives were intertwined not only with their immediate neighbors, but with a wider community. Alongside trade, communal labor began to extend beyond single settlements. During planting and harvesting seasons, families often helped those on neighboring hills. Tasks were performed slowly, deliberately, with long pauses for rest or conversation. People moved together in a steady rhythm, the scrape of wooden hoes, the soft thud of seeds hitting the soil, the quiet shuffle of baskets. Children sometimes followed their parents or played nearby, adding faint laughter to the otherwise calm environment. Each hour of work reinforced cooperation and established gentle habits of mutual reliance. Religion also encouraged inter-settlement interaction. Small shrines and sacred spaces, often near streams, groves, or hillsides, became gathering points for multiple families from different settlements. Quiet rituals, accompanied by the soft sounds of chanting or the placement of humble offerings, created shared spiritual experiences. These gatherings were not festivals or large ceremonies, but slow, deliberate occasions that strengthened community bonds and encouraged collective reflection on the cycles of nature. Leadership, too, evolved gradually. Elders who had previously guided single settlements began to coordinate with elders from neighboring communities. These early leaders shared advice, mediated minor disputes, and helped organize joint activities such as irrigation maintenance, road clearing, or communal feasts. Authority remained informal, earned through wisdom and consistency rather than by force or decree. Decisions were made slowly, often after extended discussion, with an emphasis on fairness and continuity rather than personal gain. Small innovations continued to improve daily life, though nothing changed suddenly. Pottery became slightly more durable and symmetrical. Wooden tools were refined. Cloth weaving advanced in subtle ways, producing fabrics that were more uniform in texture. Over decades, these small improvements accumulated quietly, adding layers of stability and comfort to ordinary existence. Evenings were predictable and calm. Families returned to round huts perched on the hills, carrying food, harvested crops, or repaired tools. Fires were lit inside, sending gentle flickering light across walls and casting slow-moving shadows. Meals consisted of simple ingredients: grains, vegetables, legumes, occasionally milk or cheese. Conversations were subdued and steady, often reflecting on the day's tasks or minor observations about neighbors, animals, or weather. The night sky slowly darkened and stars appeared faintly, offering distant, silent companions to the still, sleeping hills. Life remained modest and repetitive, but each quiet day contributed to the strength of community ties. Over generations, these small connections laid the foundation for a regional identity. People began to perceive themselves as part of a larger network rather than isolated families on separate hills. The repeated, gentle acts of cooperation, shared work, and quiet trade slowly produced a sense of belonging that extended beyond individual settlements. By the end of this period, the Latin hills were no longer mere clusters of isolated homes. They had become interlinked, connected by slow developing paths, informal trade, shared rituals, and emerging leadership networks. The subtle consolidation of communities prepared the region for the first steps toward organized governance. These early alliances did not yet resemble formal treaties or written laws, but they established patterns of mutual respect and collaboration that would later support the rise of Rome as a cohesive city and kingdom. As this part closes, we see how repeated, calm interaction between settlements formed the earliest foundation for structured society. In the next part, we will continue observing the gentle development of early Roman governance, the formation of rudimentary councils, and the gradual shaping of laws, all unfolding slowly, peacefully, and predictably over generations. In this sixth part of our calm and deliberate journey through early Rome, we begin to observe how the interconnected Latin communities slowly experimented with governance. Nothing happens quickly or dramatically. There are no sudden proclamations, no battles for power. Instead, leadership and decision-making emerge gently, shaped by repeated habits, quiet negotiations, and gradual trust between neighbors. These early structures will one day form the foundation of the Roman kingdom, but for now, everything unfolds slowly, predictably, and peacefully. The hills of Latium continued to host small settlements, each composed of a few extended families. Daily life remained centered on agriculture, with wheat, barley, legumes, and vegetables occupying most of the day. People tended livestock and carefully maintained paths and storage areas. Work proceeded at a slow, steady pace. Conversations drifted softly between tasks, often focused on routine matters: weather conditions, crop growth, animal care, or minor disputes over boundaries. Even when conflicts arose, they were managed calmly, usually mediated by elders with decades of observation and experience. As interactions between communities increased, the need for coordination became apparent. Tasks such as irrigation, road clearing, and seasonal gatherings required cooperation beyond the immediate family or settlement. Elders from multiple settlements began meeting quietly to discuss these matters. These councils were informal, taking place outdoors or around simple fires. No one claimed authority by force. Instead, influence was earned through patience, experience, and the consistent ability to solve problems fairly. These early councils followed a gentle rhythm. Each elder spoke in turn, their voices measured and calm. Decisions were reached slowly, often after long pauses, reflection, or even days of consideration. The purpose was not speed, but harmony. No family wished to dominate another. The goal was always to maintain balance and mutual trust. Over time, these repeated gatherings formed patterns of cooperation that slowly became embedded in daily life. Trade, which had already connected settlements, now played a subtle role in governance. By exchanging goods and observing the reliability of neighbors, families learned which settlements could be trusted for coordination in shared tasks. A neighbor who consistently offered help during harvests or repaired paths without complaint became someone whose advice carried weight during councils. These quiet, everyday interactions laid the foundation for consensus-based leadership and slowly established a sense of regional identity. Religion continued to guide community cohesion. Small shrines located near streams, groves, or hilltops served as meeting points for multiple families. During planting and harvest seasons, these sites hosted simple rituals. Families offered grains, bread, or small crafted items while speaking soft prayers for prosperity and protection. These gatherings reinforced connections between settlements, combining practical coordination with spiritual affirmation. By aligning both labor and ritual, the early Romans strengthened bonds without the need for formal decrees or written laws. Craftsmanship and technology advanced gently alongside these social developments. Pottery became more uniform, wooden tools slightly more refined, and woven fabrics more consistent. These incremental improvements not only improved daily life, but also enhanced communication and trade between settlements. Durable goods could be transported along paths with greater reliability, further encouraging collaboration and reinforcing the early networks of trust. Evenings were calm and predictable. Families returned to round huts, carrying harvested crops, repaired tools, or simple offerings. Fires were lit inside, creating a soft glow that flickered across walls and ceilings. Meals were simple, often composed of grains, legumes, vegetables, or small amounts of dairy. Conversations were subdued and slow, reflecting on the day's tasks and preparing for the next day's rhythm. Outside, the hills were quiet, only the soft sounds of nocturnal animals and distant streams interrupting the stillness. Through repeated patterns of discussion, negotiation, and collaboration, these early councils laid the groundwork for more structured governance. Authority remained informal, but increasingly recognized. Families learned that collective decision-making, grounded in fairness and patience, produced stability and reduced conflict. This slow evolution of governance ensured that future changes would build on a foundation of trust, cooperation, and continuity. By the end of this period, early Rome was still composed of small settlements on gentle hills, but the first seeds of structured society had been planted. These communities had developed informal councils, cooperative labor networks, and quiet methods for resolving disputes. Though nothing resembled the formal Roman Senate or legal codes yet, the patterns of consultation, mutual respect, and measured decision-making were firmly established. Life remained peaceful, slow, and deeply intertwined with natural cycles and community routines. As this part closes, we see how patience, repeated collaboration, and calm negotiation began forming the earliest Roman governance. In the next part, we will continue to observe how these early councils evolved further, coordinating larger projects, managing resources, and solidifying alliances that would one day support the formation of the Roman kingdom. In this seventh part of our slow and steady exploration of early Rome, we begin to observe how the scattered Latin communities, once separated by hills and different family traditions, slowly drifted toward a shared identity. There is no single moment when this happens, no sudden unification, no dramatic oath of loyalty, no great war or treaty. Instead, identity forms the same way soil enriches over centuries, grain by grain, season after season. What emerges is not yet Rome as a city, nor Rome as a kingdom, but the faint outline of something larger than a settlement and gentler than a state, a proto-urban community shaped by habit, necessity, and quiet cooperation. The families living on the hills still maintain their individual rhythms. Each hillside had its distinct patterns of daily work, its preferred planting times, its own small shrines and household spirits. Yet, as generations passed, these differences began to soften. Paths connecting the hills grew more traveled, their surfaces more compacted. Travelers could follow them without thinking, even in fading light. These pathways became gentle threads, weaving together a loose network of settlements, gradually giving the sense that the hills belonged not to isolated families, but to a shared geographical home. Trade remained simple, but its frequency increased. More pottery, more woven cloth, more wooden tools moved quietly between settlements. People no longer needed to introduce themselves each time they arrived at a neighboring community. They recognized faces, voices, even mannerisms across the hills. The familiarity created comfort. A potter from one hill might leave extra bowls with a family on another, trusting they would be repaid at the next gathering. This growing trust reduced the need for careful negotiation. Exchanges became fluid, supported by shared expectations that everyone would contribute fairly. Alongside this economic connection, a cultural blending unfolded. Songs sung during planting began sounding similar across the hills. Rituals performed at different shrines began following similar patterns. Even the styles of pottery and clothing, once varied, slowly drifted toward common shapes and colors. This did not happen intentionally. Rather, repeated contact gently smoothed differences until the region felt cohesive without anyone explicitly deciding it should. Leadership continued evolving at a measured pace. Elders who once advised only their own families now found themselves discussing issues that affected multiple hills. Councils expanded in both size and purpose. Instead of addressing only minor disputes or shared labor, they increasingly considered broader matters: where new storage pits should be dug, how to manage grazing land, which paths needed reinforcement, or how to respond if a distant group began approaching the region. These decisions were still made with great patience, sometimes over days or even seasons, but the scope of discussion widened, and with it, the sense that the hills formed a unified community. One of the most important developments was the emergence of shared gathering spaces. Certain clearings between hills, once empty stretches of land, gradually became natural meeting places. People stopped there during travel, exchanged stories, or held small markets. Over time, these spaces gained meaning. Families left stones there to mark significant events or placed offerings at nearby trees. A few simple structures were eventually built: wooden posts marking boundaries, flat stones used as seating, and small altars for ritual use. Nothing grand, but significant nonetheless. These spaces served as early focal points for gatherings larger than those hosted by any single hill. Seasonal festivals also began to develop. These festivals were quiet and unassuming, lacking the music, feasting, or spectacle of later Roman celebrations. Instead, they involved simple offerings of grain, bread, or woven items. People gathered to give thanks for rainfall, acknowledge the passing of seasons, or honor ancestral spirits. The festivals allowed families from different hills to experience a sense of shared time. Everyone participated in the same ritual, spoke the same quiet prayers, and observed the same natural cycles. Over many generations, this repeated synchronization created cultural unity deeper than trade or labor alone could achieve. Daily life remained steady and repetitive. Families woke with the sun, prepared tools, and walked slowly to their fields. The soundscape was ordinary, birds calling in the morning, animals shifting in enclosures, the soft scrape of wooden tools against the soil. Work was unhurried, punctuated by long pauses for rest or contemplation. People noticed small details, the texture of earth after rain, the pattern of clouds drifting above the hills, the slight difference in the direction of wind at the start of each season. These observations, passed down quietly through generations, contributed to shared agricultural knowledge and created the foundation for larger communal planning. The slow rise of proto-urban life also influenced housing. While most families still lived in round huts with thatched roofs, clusters of huts became more dense in certain areas. Instead of being spaced far apart, homes began appearing closer together near key paths or gathering spaces. These clusters formed early neighborhood-like structures. Living closer meant more frequent cooperation. Children played together, adults exchanged tools, cooking fires were shared, and knowledge spread more easily. Even though there was no formal city, the feeling of communal living, of people belonging together in shared space, became stronger. Water management became an increasingly important aspect of collaboration. Streams needed to be kept clear, wells had to be protected, and irrigation channels required regular maintenance. These tasks were too large for single families. As a result, multiple settlements coordinated schedules, gathered tools, and worked side by side to ensure reliable water supplies. The work moved slowly, accompanied by soft conversation, the trickle of water, and the steady movement of hands and tools. The shared responsibility deepened trust and reinforced the idea that the hills were bound together by both geography and human cooperation. Even language began shifting subtly. Certain words, once unique to specific hills, became universally recognized. Expressions of greeting, thanks, or apology drifted toward shared forms. Children adopted blended speech patterns naturally, smoothing linguistic differences without deliberate effort. Over time, such shared language fostered clearer communication and a stronger sense of unity. As the generations continued, these patterns, shared labor, shared rituals, shared space, shared speech, created something new and quietly transformative, the beginnings of a collective identity. People no longer thought of themselves only as members of a single family or a single hill, but as part of a broader group, connected by land, tradition, and cooperative practice. Without realizing it, the early inhabitants of the hills were becoming a community larger than any they had known before. By the end of this period, life was still simple. No monumental buildings stood on the hills, no formal councils or codified laws existed, and no armies marched under banners. Yet the foundations of urban life, common identity, shared spaces, and coordinated governance had gently emerged. The hills were no longer isolated islands of family life, but the early shape of what would, much later, become a unified settlement. Rome. As this section closes, we see how centuries of slow cooperation form the subtle roots of a community that would one day dominate vast regions. In the next part, we will observe how these early patterns of unity strengthened further, leading to more formal gatherings, early defense cooperation, and the first architectural hints of a central settlement taking shape. In the vastness of the Roman Empire, where mountains, forests, plains, and coastlines spread across thousands of kilometers, travel became both a necessity and a quiet ritual of life. Although Rome is often remembered for its armies, emperors, and grand architecture, one of its greatest achievements was its network of roads, Straight, sturdy, and built with remarkable patience. These roads connected the empire like threads woven into an enormous tapestry. Yet what fascinates us most is not the engineering itself, but the peaceful rhythm of travel along these routes. The slow footsteps, the constant crunch of gravel, the distant songs of birds, and the gentle murmur of human movement across landscapes that changed almost imperceptibly with each passing mile. Every journey began with preparation. Romans rarely traveled spontaneously. Whether a merchant heading to a nearby town, a soldier marching to a distant outpost, or a family visiting relatives in another province, careful planning came first. Travelers packed simple but reliable items, wool or linen clothing suited to the climate, a cloak for cold or rain, a small bag of coins, a flask for water, bread or dried figs, and sometimes a travel charm or small household god for protection. These modest belongings, tied carefully or stored in leather pouches, represented a sense of comfort, a reminder of home amid the uncertainty of distant roads. The Roman road system, known as the Viae, formed the backbone of travel. Roads were built in layers: stones, gravel, sand, and tightly packed earth, topped with smooth paving slabs. This method created surfaces that remained sturdy for centuries. A traveler could walk for days without encountering deep mud or treacherous ruts. Mile markers appeared regularly, carved stone pillars that told the distance to Rome or nearby towns. They stood silently beside the road, their inscriptions faded by wind and rain, yet still offering a subtle reassurance, an ancient reminder that one was never lost. Travelers often began their journey early in the morning, when the air was cool and shadows stretched across the ground. As the first steps carried them away from familiar surroundings, the world gradually became quieter. The city noise faded, replaced by the soft rustle of cypress trees, the chirping of birds, and the gentle rhythm of footsteps. Some travelers walked alone, deep in thought, while others moved in small groups, speaking only occasionally. The early hours were peaceful, marked by a sense of steady progress rather than urgency. Along major routes, inns known as tabernas or mansiones were spaced at regular intervals. These establishments were simple, rooms with wooden benches, basic meals of bread, wine, and stews. But for travelers, they offered rest. Inside, the warm smell of cooked lentils or roasted vegetables drifted through the air. Lamps flickered softly against plastered walls. People spoke in low voices, sharing the road's quiet stories. Rumors from distant provinces, encounters with kind strangers, or memories of journeys long past. No one stayed long, but the temporary closeness created a brief sense of belonging. For those traveling by cart or wagon, the experience was slower and steadier. Wheels creaked softly, and the animals pulling the load, donkeys, mules, or oxen, moved with patient steps. Drivers guided them gently, often humming or speaking to them as companions rather than tools. In the countryside, fields stretched endlessly, sometimes golden with wheat, other times left wild and untouched. The sky felt vast, and the air held a kind of silence that modern travelers rarely experience. Movement through such landscapes offered space for thoughts to drift, wandering as freely as the road ahead. Soldiers traveling in groups added another dimension to Roman roads. Their march, though disciplined, was not harsh or hurried. The steady thud of sandals, the soft clink of armor, and the occasional murmur of conversation created a sort of rhythm, predictable and almost comforting. At night, when camps were set up, the glow of small fires lit the surroundings. Soldiers shared meals, tended to equipment, wrote simple letters home, or rested quietly. Even these military journeys, often imagined as intense or demanding, contain long stretches of calm reflection. One of the most remarkable aspects of Roman travel was the changing scenery. As one moved across regions, landscapes transformed gradually. The coastal route smelled faintly of salt and carried the distant sound of waves. Inland roads passed through olive groves, vineyards, and rolling hills dotted with small farms. In mountainous regions, stone pathways wound between cliffs, where the air was crisp and cool. Travelers rarely rushed. They absorbed these slow transitions, becoming part of the land's gentle rhythm. Bridges, aqueducts, and tunnels added moments of surprise. A traveler might cross a stone bridge spanning a quiet river, the water below gliding with serene smoothness. Or they might walk alongside an aqueduct stretching across the horizon, its arches casting elongated shadows on the ground. These structures, monumental yet peaceful, reminded travelers of the empire's reach, but also of human patience, craftsmanship, and dedication. When night approached, the world softened further. The sky turned orange, then deep blue. Shadows lengthened and temperatures dropped gently. Travelers sought shelter by rivers, under trees, or near roadside shrines. A small fire provided warmth, and the crackling flames offered comfort against the growing darkness. The night sounds, crickets, distant animals, the rustle of wind through leaves, became a kind of lullaby. People spoke little, letting the natural world fill the silence. Sleep, wrapped in cloaks and blankets, came slowly and easily. For wealthier Romans, travel sometimes included sailing along the Mediterranean. Ports buzzed quietly with activity, fishermen mending nets, sailors preparing ropes, and merchants inspecting goods. Boarding a ship meant surrendering to the sea's rhythm. Waves lapped against wooden hulls, sails creaked, and the gentle rocking motion lulled travelers into contemplation. The journey could last days or weeks, depending on winds and currents, but the slowness of it offered a peaceful escape from the noise of city life. Throughout the empire, travel served many purposes: trade, diplomacy, religion, exploration, or simple curiosity. Yet in every case, the experience was marked by consistency, long stretches of quiet movement, landscapes unfolding slowly, and the steady companionship of the road. For many Romans, traveling was less about reaching a destination and more about the journey itself, a gradual transition from one moment of life to another. When travelers finally arrived at their destination, whether a large city with bustling streets or a small village nestled among trees, they carried with them the calm of the road. The memories of distant scenery, quiet mornings, and restful nights lingered like gentle echoes. Even after settling into new surroundings, travelers often felt a longing for the quiet rhythm of walking, the comfort of familiar mile markers, and the simple harmony between human life and the vast world. In this way, Roman roads did more than connect places. They created a shared experience of movement and stillness. They carried people through landscapes both familiar and strange, offering glimpses of nature's simplicity and humanity's subtle persistence. Steady lines stretching across the empire, they embodied a deep, ancient tranquility that remains felt even now in their silent ruins. In the quiet expanse of the Roman world, religion was not a matter of sudden miracles or dramatic revelations. It unfolded instead in small gestures, whispered prayers, gentle offerings, and the peaceful acceptance of the divine presence woven through daily life. To the Romans, the gods were not distant or unreachable. They existed in the rustling of leaves, the warm glow of a lamp, the smell of incense rising in the air, and the simple rituals that accompanied ordinary activities. In this chapter, we drift slowly through the spiritual landscape of ancient Rome, exploring its temples, household shrines, festivals, superstitions, and the calm rhythm of its religious rituals, each of them forming a quiet, steady pulse beneath the empire's grand history. Roman religion was remarkably practical. The goal was not to seek personal enlightenment or spiritual transformation, but to maintain harmony between humans and the divine. This harmony was called Pax the peace of the gods. It was believed that as long as Romans honored their deities with respect and regular rituals, the gods would in return bless the community with prosperity, good harvests, stability, and safety. Religion therefore became a gentle routine, familiar and comforting, shaping the flow of daily life without ever demanding intense emotion or dramatic expressions of faith. At the heart of Roman spirituality were the household gods. Every home, from the grandest villa to the smallest apartment, had a sacred corner known as the lararium. In wealthy houses, it might be a decorated niche with painted images, small statues, and offering tables. In humbler homes, it could be a simple shelf or a clay figurine placed carefully near the kitchen. The household buzz, lares and penates, protected the family, the hearth, and the daily rhythm of domestic life. Each morning, a family member might light a small incense stick, pour a drop of wine, or place a piece of bread near the shrine. These offerings were quiet and modest, but they carried deep meaning. They reminded Romans that even the simplest moments were shared with the divine. Communities also maintained larger temples dedicated to major gods such as Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, Mars, Venus, and Apollo. Temples were not always places of worship in the way we imagine today. Many were peaceful sanctuaries, cool and shaded, where people entered briefly to offer thanks, leave a small coin, or whisper a request. Priests tended the temples with steady devotion, performing rituals that ensured the gods remained pleased. These rituals followed ancient patterns, repeated exactly as tradition required. There was comfort in this repetition, a sense that Rome's connection with the divine was stable, unbroken, and gently flowing. Festivals were another important part of Roman religious life, though they too carried a calm, communal energy rather than the loud excitement of modern celebrations. Throughout the year, specific days were set aside to honor particular gods. During the Saturnalia, for example, social norms loosened, gifts were exchanged, and homes were filled with laughter. Yet even the joyous atmosphere remained grounded in tradition and ritual. The Lupercalia, Vestalia, and Floralia each brought their own customs, prayers, and quiet moments of reflection. These festivals mark the passing of time, helping people feel connected to both the cycle of seasons and the continuity of their ancestors. Rome was home to countless small shrines scattered across streets, crossroads, and countryside paths. A traveler might pause briefly at a wayside altar, leaving a flower or murmuring a simple, "Be favorable," to the spirits of the road. Farmers honored local deities who protected fields, livestock, and harvests. Sailors offered prayers to Neptune before embarking on a voyage, hoping the sea would remain calm. These small gestures created an atmosphere of shared spirituality across the empire. Everyone, regardless of social class or profession, took part in maintaining the gentle balance between earthly life and divine presence. One of the most serene aspects of Roman religious practice was augury, the reading of signs from the natural world. Augurs, trained in their craft, observed the flight of birds, the patterns of clouds, or the behavior of animals to interpret divine messages. These interpretations were not dramatic prophecy, but subtle guidance, offering insight into whether a particular action was favored by the gods. The augur's work was slow, patient, and contemplative, rooted in an understanding that nature itself could speak if one listened carefully enough. Another central figure in Roman religious life was the pontifex, a priest responsible for maintaining the calendar of rituals and ensuring that traditions were upheld. Their work was administrative, steady, and methodical. The most revered among them was the Pontifex Maximus, a title later held by many emperors. Yet even this position was less about power than it was about guardianship, protecting rituals, preserving sacred laws, and ensuring that Rome's spiritual rhythm never faltered. In Rome, religion also intertwined with public life. Important political decisions required offerings and prayers. Before battles, commanders sought omens. When temples were dedicated or statues erected, ceremonies followed precise patterns established long ago. These rituals strengthened the connection between the divine and the civic identity of Rome. Citizens found reassurance in the stability of these traditions, trusting that the gods watched over the empire through every triumph and challenge. Despite the structured nature of formal rituals, personal spirituality remained gentle and deeply human. People often carried small amulets for protection, tiny statues of gods, carved stones, or simple charms. They uttered quiet prayers for health, safe childbirth, or family well-being. These personal practices added a soft, intimate layer to the larger religious landscape. Everyone from the wealthiest senator to the humblest laborer felt the presence of the divine in the calm moments between tasks, meals, and responsibilities. Temples, especially those in peaceful rural areas, provided a unique atmosphere of stillness. Surrounded by olive groves, cypress trees, or open fields, they offered a place where the mind could drift. Visitors entered slowly, stepping onto cool marble floors, inhaling the faint scent of incense, and hearing the quiet echo of their footsteps. In such spaces, time seemed to stretch gently, allowing thoughts to flow unhurried. Many Romans visited these temples not out of obligation, but out of a desire for tranquility, a chance to escape the noise of daily life and rest in the presence of the gods. As the empire expanded, Rome encountered new cultures and new deities. Instead of resisting these influences, Romans often welcomed them, blending traditions gradually and peacefully. Egyptian, Greek, Persian, and even local provincial gods found places within Roman spirituality. Isis, Mithras, Cybele, and other foreign deities gained followers who practiced their rituals with steady devotion. These cults brought new forms of prayer, new rhythms of worship, and new layers of calm to Rome's spiritual landscape. Though some rituals differed in style, they shared the same general purpose: to bring comfort, guidance, and peace of mind. Sacred fires played an important role in Roman religion as well. The most famous belonged to the Vestal Virgins, priestesses who tended the eternal flame of Vesta, goddess of the hearth. Their duty was both symbolic and practical. As long as the fire burned, Rome's heart remained protected. The flame's soft glow, flickering in the stillness of the temple, became a powerful symbol of continuity. People believed that the fire's steady light reflected the stability of Rome itself, calm, enduring, and quietly persistent. Rituals surrounding life and death also followed gentle patterns. Births were blessed with offerings. Coming-of-age ceremonies involved prayers for guidance. Weddings included simple sacrifices asking the gods for harmony. Even funerals, though somber, emphasized remembrance and peaceful passage to the afterlife. Families gathered to share memories, light lamps, and offer incense at the tombs of their ancestors. These practices created a sense of comfort, bridging the gap between the living and the dead through acts of quiet devotion. In the countryside, spirituality connected deeply with nature. Farmers thanked the gods for rain, sunlight, and fertile soil. Shepherds prayed while watching over their flocks. Fishermen offered gratitude for safe waters. These small rituals, carried out under open skies or beside flowing rivers, contributed to a peaceful interweaving of human life with the natural world. The landscape itself felt sacred. Mountains, forests, springs, and groves were believed to host divine spirits known as Numina. Approaching such places, Romans often moved slowly, speaking in soft tones, aware that they were sharing space with ancient and unseen presences. Even the passing of time held spiritual meaning. Each month carried festivals, observances, and simple rituals that repeated year after year. The Roman calendar was filled with quiet markers that reminded people of the turning seasons, the cycles of growth and rest in the gentle flow of life. Lighting a lamp for a household god or offering a few grains of salt was a small act, yet performed by millions across the empire, it created a collective rhythm of devotion. At night, the spiritual atmosphere grew even more serene. Lamps flickered softly in homes, casting warm light onto household shrines. The distant hum of the city faded into silence. For many, this was the most peaceful time to offer prayers. Simple thoughts sent into the quiet, asking the gods to watch over family, protect the home, and bring restful sleep. In these moments, Roman religion felt less like a system of rituals and more like a gentle companion, ever present, guiding the mind toward calmness. Over centuries, the Roman spiritual landscape shifted, absorbing new beliefs and transforming slowly. Yet throughout all changes, one constant remained, the gentle rhythm of devotion. Whether in grand temples, modest shrines, or simple household corners, the Romans practiced religion with a sense of quiet continuity. They found comfort in the familiar gestures, the unwavering rituals, and the soft presence of the divine woven into the fabric of everyday life. Through these slow, steady moments, we glimpse a civilization not driven solely by power or conquest, but grounded in peaceful habits, shared traditions, and a deep respect for the unseen forces that shape their world. And as we drift through this spiritual portrait of ancient Rome, we too can feel the calm pulse of a culture that found harmony in the quiet spaces between life's many responsibilities. Daily life in ancient Rome did not unfold with the intense drama that often dominates popular portrayals. Instead, it moved steadily, quietly, and predictably. Most Romans lived according to gentle routines shaped by family responsibilities, work demands, neighborhood traditions, seasonal cycles, and the slow rhythm of household tasks. In this chapter, we follow the calm flow of an ordinary Roman day, allowing the soft pace of their world to guide us through streets, homes, markets, meals, and the subtle art of simply living. We begin at dawn, a time when the first light touched rooftops made of terracotta tiles. Homes, whether large villas or modest apartments, slowly awakened. Birds stirred on windowsills, guards changed shifts at city gates, and the sounds of distant footsteps echoed through narrow streets. Romans rarely rushed in the early morning. Waking was gradual, shaped by the natural rising of the sun. Lamps were extinguished, shutters open, and cool air drifted gently into rooms still dim from the night. In wealthier households, servants moved quietly, lighting small fires, fetching water, or preparing simple morning offerings to the household gods at the lararium. These rituals required no elaborate ceremony, just a calm gesture, such as placing a small piece of bread or lighting a pinch of incense. The smoke rose slowly, curling peacefully in the still air, symbolizing the start of another day guided by tradition and tranquil continuity. For many Romans, the first meal of the day was light. Bread, olives, cheese, or leftover grains from the previous evening were common choices. Wealthy families might enjoy figs, honey, or lightly seasoned eggs, but even their meals remained relatively simple compared to modern expectations. Breakfast was not a moment of indulgence, but a quiet pause before labor. People ate while sitting on stools, leaning against walls, or sometimes standing near windows that overlooked the waking city. As morning progressed, streets slowly filled with activity. Shopkeepers lifted wooden shutters to reveal modest storefronts, bakers selling warm loaves, potters displaying bowls and lamps, and cobblers carefully aligning their tools on workbenches. Vendors spoke softly to early customers, offering fresh produce, herbs, or small household items. Bronze and silver coins exchanged hands with barely a sound, each transaction reinforcing the gentle, interplay of commerce that sustained urban life. Roman streets were rarely silent, but their noise was not overwhelming. It was a steady, soft mixture of footsteps, carts rolling over stone, and the distant murmur of conversations. Children walked together to lessons, carrying wax tablets. Laborers headed toward workshops or construction sites. Women visited markets, greeted neighbors, and made arrangements for the day's cooking. Everything unfolded with a sense of communal familiarity. People recognized one another, shared brief nods or soft greetings, and continued with their routines. Inside Roman homes, architecture played a calm, grounding role. Villas opened onto atriums, central spaces where light filtered gently through roof openings called compluviums. A pool, the impluvium, sat beneath, reflecting light like a still mirror. The air remained cool even on warm days. Wealthy homes extended into peristyles, courtyards with shaded walkways and carefully maintained gardens. These spaces created a sense of tranquility, inviting residents to pause, breathe, and move slowly. Plants such as rosemary, bay, and small citrus trees added faint scents that made mornings feel fresh and peaceful. Modest apartments known as insulae were simpler but still followed rhythms of quiet domestic activity. Neighbors heard each other preparing meals, sweeping doorways, or filling pitchers from shared fountains. Even in crowded districts, people adapted to the slow-paced routines of urban life, blending their movements into the broader rhythm of the city. Laundry hung from balconies, swaying gently in the breeze. Cats wandered between steps, sunning themselves on warm stones. Mid-morning usually brought the most concentrated activity. Workshops buzzed with steady work, yet never chaotically. Metal workers hammered rhythmically, potters shaped clay with slow, practiced motions, and weavers passed threads through looms with methodical consistency. The city's economy did not rely on rapid output, but on repetition and patience. Skills were passed down through generations, with each craftsperson contributing to an atmosphere of industrious calm. Markets grew livelier as vendors arranged baskets of fruits, vegetables, grains, and spices. The sense of fresh herbs, garlic, olive oil, and warm bread drifted through the air. Customers examined items slowly, comparing prices, textures, and freshness. Yet bargaining was rarely loud or aggressive. It was a quiet negotiation. A few words exchanged, a nod, a small adjustment of coins. Market life reflected the Roman preference for practicality and consistency over flamboyance. Around midday, many Romans took time to rest. Shops closed briefly, parents returned home, and meals were prepared. The main meal, cena, could be modest or elaborate depending on one's status. Poorer families ate porridge, bread, vegetables, and occasionally fish. Wealthier families sometimes enjoyed dishes with sauces, seasoned meats, fresh fruits, or wines diluted with water. Regardless of the ingredients, meals unfolded slowly, encouraging conversation and shared reflection. Eating was not a rushed activity, but a moment of connection. Children played quietly in courtyards or near fountains. Their games were simple: rolling hoops, tossing nuts, drawing lines in dust, or pretending to be soldiers and merchants. Their laughter blended with the gentle sounds of the city, creating an atmosphere of innocence and continuity. Elders often watched from doorways or benches, offering advice or telling stories when asked. Time felt unhurried, as if each hour drifted softly into the next. Afternoons brought a return to work for some, while others engaged in leisurely activities. Men might visit public baths, spaces that were far more than places to wash. The baths offered warm pools, cool pools, steam rooms, exercise areas, gardens, and quiet corners for conversation. People moved through these spaces at a relaxed pace, soaking in the warmth, listening to soft echoes, or sitting in shaded areas to discuss politics, business, Or family matters. The baths were a sanctuary of tranquility where the mind could drift gently, free from the pressures of the outside world. Women spent afternoons weaving, sewing, preparing household items, or visiting neighbors. Social bonds formed quietly through shared tasks, soft conversations, and mutual support. In rural areas, afternoons were filled with tending fields, supervising harvests, or caring for animals. Even in these labor-heavy settings, the work followed natural rhythms, plowing during specific seasons, pruning during others, and always adapting to the gentle cycles of the environment. As evening approached, the city's energy softened once more. Torches and oil lamps were lit, casting warm light over streets, doorways, and windows. People returned home gradually, carrying small purchases, bags of grain, or tools from their work. The smell of cooking rose from homes. Stews simmering slowly, bread baking in communal ovens, or fish grilled with herbs. Families gathered for supper, discussing the day's events with quiet voices. Sometimes meals ended with fruit or nuts, but extravagance was rare. Food remained simple and comforting. After supper, many Romans enjoyed peaceful routines. Some sat near doorways to enjoy the cool air, greeting neighbors as they passed. Others strolled through streets lit by the faint glow of lamps. Children listened to stories from parents or grandparents, their eyes heavy with sleep. Older residents shared memories of earlier years, recounting events slowly and thoughtfully. These stories created threads of continuity across generations, grounding the community in shared experiences. In the interior rooms of homes, lamps flickered gently, creating shadows across painted walls. These images, mythical scenes, landscapes, or simple geometric patterns, glowed softly in the dim light. The atmosphere felt timeless and serene. People prepared to sleep by securing doors, covering embers and hearths, and offering one final quiet prayer to the household gods. Sleep arrived gradually, accompanied by the muffled sounds of the city settling into stillness. Night in Rome was not silent, but it was calm. The distant sound of guards walking their routes, the soft hooves of a horse, or the occasional murmur from a tavern blended into a gentle background hum. Lamps flickered along main roads, marking pathways through the dark. The Tiber River flowed steadily, reflecting moonlight in slow, shimmering waves. Above the city, stars appeared faint but steady, giving Romans a sense of connection to the vastness beyond their daily routines. Rural life ended even more quietly. In the countryside, night brought deep darkness and profound stillness. Farmers rested after long days of labor, animals settled in barns, and fields stretched silently toward the horizon. The crackling of a fire, the chirping of insects, or the distant call of an owl accompanied the slow drift into sleep. Without the noise of city life, the countryside moved entirely at the pace of nature, each sound carrying a sense of calm continuity. Across the empire, despite differences in wealth, geography, and occupation, Romans shared these routines. Life unfolded in cycles: waking, eating, working, resting, worshiping, and sleeping. There was order without rigidity, tradition without pressure, and routine without monotony. These small, predictable rhythms created a foundation for the stability of Roman society. People knew what to expect each day. They understood their roles, their responsibilities, and the gentle flow of time. In reflecting on the daily life of ancient Rome, one sees not the grand spectacles of history books, but a tapestry of quiet moments. Simple conversations, peaceful meals, routine tasks, neighborhood interactions, and the soft presence of religion created a world that felt stable and grounded. These were the moments that truly defined Rome, not the battles or politics, but the calm heartbeat of ordinary lives lived across centuries. And as this chapter closes, we step away from the quiet streets, dimly lit rooms, and soft conversations of ancient Rome. In the next part, we will continue exploring the deeper layers of Roman society, observing how its quiet domestic routines coexisted with the empire's growing complexity. In this 11th part of our quiet and unhurried exploration of early Rome, we turn our attention to something subtle yet deeply important: the gradual emergence of what we might call an early Roman identity. This identity did not appear suddenly, it was not proclaimed in a single moment, nor shaped by a famous leader. Instead, it developed gently over generations, influenced by daily habits, shared rituals, repeated cooperation, and the slow blending of families who lived on and around the hills that would one day form the heart of Rome. Life continued at a measured pace. Families tended their winter fields, cared for their livestock, repaired their tools, and strengthened their huts. The familiar rhythms of sowing, harvesting, and resting remained central to daily existence. Yet with each passing decade, small but meaningful connections grew between settlements. Paths became more used. Simple trade became more predictable. Elders met more frequently. These quiet patterns of cooperation slowly produced a sense of familiarity and mutual recognition among the communities. Though each settlement had its own local customs, they all shared a similar environment, similar foods, similar weather, and similar challenges. Over time, this resemblance created comfort and familiarity. When families from one hill visited another for rituals or discussions, they recognized the ways their neighbors lived. They saw huts shaped in similar ways, fields cultivated with similar tools, and shrines decorated with similar offerings. This sense of similarity, gently reinforced by repeated encounters, began to shape the earliest outlines of a shared identity. Language played a quiet role in this slow transformation. The Latin dialects spoken across the region developed small shifts depending on the hill or settlement, but the core structure remained the same. Families could understand one another easily, even when speech included unusual turns of phrase or particular expressions from a specific valley. These small differences were not barriers, they were reminders of closeness and shared ancestry. Because communication was clear and familiar, cooperation became easier and misunderstandings rare. Religion continued to guide behavior. Shrines built to honor household gods, field spirits, and protective deities became places where communities gathered at the same times each year. Planting rituals in spring, offerings during harvest, quiet prayers for rain or protection, and solemn moments during cold winters drew families together. Even though each settlement maintained its own traditions, these rituals shared a similar structure. Offerings of grains, bread, small cups of milk, or handcrafted objects were arranged in similar ways. Spoken prayers carried the same soft, reverent tone. This gentle spiritual alignment further connected the communities, creating a sense that they were part of something larger than a single family or hill. Beyond religion, shared daily challenges also shaped collective identity. Seasonal storms affected all communities at the same time. Dry summers required everyone to manage water carefully. The movement of animals, the growth of plants, and the presence of dangers, whether natural or human, were shared experiences. When a field flooded or a shelter collapsed, neighboring families often stepped in to help. These acts of cooperation were not dramatic rescues, but steady, practical gestures, providing spare tools, helping to rebuild a roof, or joining to dig new channels for water drainage. Each small act reinforced trust. Trade remained a quiet but powerful influence. Goods exchanged between settlements were not exotic or luxurious. They were simple necessities that strengthened bonds. Extra grain from one hill might be traded for woven cloth from another. Clay vessels from one settlement might be exchanged for wooden tools from another group. These goods traveled slowly along footpaths, carried in woven baskets or on the backs of animals. The steady movement of these items maintained connections that extended beyond immediate neighbors, linking distant settlements across the region. As trust deepened, cooperation expanded. Elders from different hills met more often to discuss matters that affected multiple communities. Early councils that once gathered only for major concerns gradually became more routine. They discussed mundane topics such as the maintenance of paths, the sharing of grazing land, or the scheduling of rituals. These meetings were unhurried, filled with patient explanations and long silences as everyone considered the matter at hand. Decisions emerged gradually through consensus rather than authority. This process strengthened the sense that all communities, while independent, belong to a shared network. Marriage also played a significant role in shaping identity. As generations passed, families formed connections with neighbors through marriage. Individuals who grew up on one hill moved to another after marrying, bringing with them their habits, stories, and skills. These movements blended traditions in small, quiet ways. A recipe from one hill might become common on another. A tool-making technique might spread. A story told by elders might begin to appear in gatherings on distant settlements. Through such gradual blending, cultural traits once unique to individual settlements slowly became shared across the region. Children observed these changes without fully realizing their significance. For them, visiting another settlement was not unusual, but rather an accepted part of life. They played with children from other hills during rituals or family visits. They learned to recognize familiar patterns in huts, clothing, speech, and customs wherever they went. This early exposure shaped their understanding of the world. Instead of viewing neighboring settlements as separate or distant, they grew up seeing them as extensions of their own environment. This mindset created a natural foundation for a shared identity. Craftsmanship also contributed to unity. And as tools improved and techniques spread, objects from different settlements began to resemble one another. Pottery developed similar shapes. Fabrics displayed familiar patterns. Wooden implements shared recognizable features. These shared designs came not from deliberate attempts to create uniformity, but from the simple circulation of ideas through everyday interactions. Over time, the material culture of the region became consistent enough for people to see themselves as part of the same broader community. Even the landscape itself played a quiet role. The hills, valleys, streams, and trees of the region became familiar markers to all families. When people traveled, they recognized landmarks regardless of the path taken. Certain groves or springs gained reputations for beauty or spiritual significance. Others became associated with meetings or seasonal gatherings. These shared places acted as anchors in collective memory, reinforcing a sense of belonging to the land. As decades passed, all these subtle developments accumulated. Families no longer thought of themselves only as residents of a single hill. They began to understand themselves as part of a connected region with shared customs, shared habits, shared stories, and shared aspirations. This early Roman identity remained simple and understated, rooted in daily life rather than formal declarations. It had no symbols or official language, yet it was deeply felt, created through thousands of ordinary interactions. By the end of this period, the communities around the hills that would become Rome possessed a quiet but unmistakable cohesion. They had not yet formed a kingdom, and there was no unified leadership. Still, the foundations for unity were firmly in place. Cooperation was familiar, trust was widespread, and shared traditions had become part of life. The earliest seeds of Roman culture, its practicality, its patience, its emphasis on stability and cooperation, had begun to take root in everyday behavior. In the next part of our journey, we will continue to follow this slow evolution. We will observe how these early communities began coordinating larger projects, managing more complex resources, and preparing for the emergence of the political structures that would eventually shape Rome's earliest kings. In this 12th part of our slow and peaceful journey through the early history of Rome, we continue observing how the small Latin communities gradually evolved, not through dramatic events or sudden political revolutions, but through the steady accumulation of shared habits, collaborative efforts, and quiet trust. These developments, although modest in appearance, played a crucial role in shaping the earliest cooperative structures. As generations passed and families kept living on the hills around the Tiber, they began to realize that their lives were increasingly intertwined and that larger, more organized projects could benefit everyone. Life remained calm and predictable for most people. The sun rose over the soft hills, fields shimmered with morning dew, and families resumed their daily routines. These routines, familiar and rarely disrupted, formed the backbone of early society. People fetched water from nearby springs, tended to growing crops, repaired fences, cared for livestock, and monitored the weather. Nothing happened abruptly. Everything followed a gentle sequence shaped by nature's rhythms. But beneath this surface of peaceful routine, a subtle transformation was unfolding. The small settlements, each composed of several families related by ancestry or long-standing alliance, began to recognize shared challenges that no single family could solve alone. These challenges emerged gradually and naturally: the need to manage seasonal flooding, the need to clear or maintain certain shared paths, the need to build safe places for storing grains during wetter seasons, and the need to organize rituals that brought several communities together. Because these tasks required cooperation, communities slowly adapted their social structures to address them. The earliest councils, which we discussed in earlier parts, continued to evolve. What began as simple meetings of elders became more regular and slightly more organized. Still, these gatherings were calm and unhurried. Elders took their time. They sat under trees, near shrines, or in open spaces overlooking the fields. Conversations flowed gently, without argument or tension. Individuals spoke at length, not to persuade or dominate, but to share observations, concerns, and ideas. The purpose of these meetings remained harmony and continuity, not power. Over time, the councils developed informal expectations. Certain elders, known for their experience or wisdom, were listened to more attentively. Others, known for their fairness or patience, were often asked to mediate small disputes. However, no one held formal authority. The early Latin communities valued balance, and they understood that no decision was useful if it created resentment. So every agreement was shaped by compromise. One of the earliest large-scale projects undertaken by these communities was environmental management. The landscape around the Tiber River, while rich and fertile, could also be unpredictable. Seasonal rains caused small streams to swell, and low-lying fields could become muddy or unusable. Families began discussing ways to guide water more effectively. Their first attempts were simple: digging shallow channels, placing stones to strengthen banks, and clearing debris after storms. These efforts were usually local, focusing on areas near a particular settlement. But eventually, communities realized that the flow of water did not respect their boundaries. A channel dug on one hill influenced runoff on another. A blocked path downstream could cause flooding upstream. This interconnectedness led to greater coordination. Families from multiple settlements spent days working together, digging longer channels, reinforcing ground with wooden stakes, and organizing shared maintenance schedules. These projects were slow and physically demanding, but they built trust and strengthened bonds. Another early initiative involved improving the paths between settlements. As trade and intermarriage increased, people traveled more often. While these paths required nothing more advanced than foot traffic, they still needed periodic clearing, leveling, and marking. Fallen branches had to be removed, overgrown bushes had to be trimmed. Occasionally, muddy areas required stones or wooden planks to make them passable. Communities worked together to maintain these paths, especially during the harvest season, when the movement of goods was most frequent. Along these paths, families began placing markers, simple stacks of stones or carved wooden stakes, to indicate directions or distances. These markers were not standardized or official, but they gradually became familiar to travelers. People recognized certain shapes, symbols, or arrangements, and they relied on them when traveling at dawn or dusk. In a quiet way, these markers contributed to the sense of shared territory. Food storage also became a shared concern. Harvest seasons produced more grain and vegetables than families could consume immediately, and storing these goods safely was essential for surviving winters. While each family had its own storage spaces, communities recognized the value of building larger, more stable structures that could store surplus goods. These early communal granaries were simple, often made of wood and clay, and designed to keep grain dry and protected from pests. Families contributed materials and labor, and in return, they could store portions of their harvest. These shared granaries reinforced cooperation and helped prevent shortages during difficult seasons. Ritual gatherings continued to play a central role in shaping unity. During planting, harvesting, and various transitional points of the year, communities met at designated shrines or natural landmarks. These gatherings were peaceful and predictable, marked by quiet prayers, small offerings, and simple ceremonies. People brought bread, grains, crafted wooden items, or small tokens representing hopes for prosperity or protection. These rituals were not complex or hierarchical. They were communal affirmations of shared purpose. Over time, the gatherings became larger, drawing families from multiple hills. The familiar rhythms of these ceremonies strengthened cultural cohesion and reinforced the idea that the communities belonged to a shared spiritual and social landscape. Children grow up experiencing these communal efforts, and they internalize a sense of belonging that stretched beyond their immediate families. They learn from an early age that the paths they walked, the shrines they visited, and the fields they harvested were part of a larger world connecting many families. They observed elders discussing matters with patience and respect. They saw neighbors helping one another without hesitation. As they matured, these lessons shaped their understanding of community life. The earliest generations who grew up with an expanded sense of identity would one day become the adults who built the foundations of early Roman society. Marriage continued to facilitate cultural exchange. Families arranged unions not only for companionship or alliances, but also for strengthening connections between settlements. When individuals moved to new communities after marriage, they brought knowledge, skills, and customs from their birthplace. Over time, these small exchanges blended traditions, reducing differences and fostering unity. A method of weaving fabric from one hill might spread to neighboring settlements. A style of pottery might become widely adopted. A particular ritual gesture or phrase used during ceremonies might gradually become common across the region. Trade, too, played a steady role in shaping unity. While the goods exchanged were simple, grains, wooden tools, clay pots, textiles, animal products, they moved slowly and consistently between settlements. This movement of goods maintained regular communication. It allowed families to observe the reliability and habits of others. A family known for crafting durable tools earned respect and trust. A settlement known for producing abundant grain gained a reputation for generosity. These reputations traveled along the paths, shaping how communities viewed one another and how they interacted during councils or collaborative projects. Craftsmanship advanced quietly but steadily. Clay pots became thicker or better fired. Wooden structures became more stable. Tools became smoother and more comfortable to use. These improvements were not dramatic innovations. They were small refinements passed down through careful instruction. As these improvements spread, material culture across the region became more consistent. People recognized the shapes of certain tools or the styles of certain carvings as familiar, further reinforcing shared identity. The landscape itself also played a role in shaping early cooperation. Certain hills offered better views of approaching storms. Certain valleys were more fertile. Certain streams provided clearer water. Communities learned to recognize these features and gradually align their activities around them. They built paths that connected useful areas. They scheduled work routines based on predictable environmental patterns. Over time, these shared interactions with the land deepened their collective relationship with the environment, giving rise to a regional identity intimately connected to the natural world. As these developments continued, elders began discussing the possibility of larger, more complex projects, tasks that required more coordination and cooperation than before. One such project involved the construction of a larger communal gathering space. Families envisioned a central area where councils, rituals, and seasonal events could take place. The construction of such a space required substantial labor, planning, and materials. Wooden posts needed to be cut, stones needed to be moved, and the ground needed to be leveled. While the project took many seasons, its completion marked a significant step toward a unified community structure. By the end of this period, the communities around the future site of Rome had become more connected than ever before. While still independent and lacking any formal political unity, they had developed shared habits, common rituals, and coordinated practices that laid the groundwork for future organization. The slow blending of families, the steady movement of goods, the patient discussions of elders, and the repeated collaboration on shared projects all contributed to the emergence of a cohesive regional identity. In the next part, we will continue observing how these foundations paved the way for more sophisticated political structures, including the early kingship tradition that would eventually shape Rome's first formal government. In this 13th part of our slow and quiet journey through the earliest history of Rome, we continue observing the subtle changes that took place among the Latin communities long before the rise of formal kingship or political institutions. Nothing in this era moves quickly. Social structures do not appear all at once. They do not emerge through sudden decisions or dramatic confrontations. Instead, they develop through the steady repetition of daily routines, the gentle pressure of shared needs, and the patient blending of families across generations. The settlements on the hills remain small, each composed of circular huts arranged in simple clusters. Families wake before dawn, moving through familiar motions. Someone feeds livestock. Someone checks storage pits. Someone prepares small morning meals from grains softened overnight. These tasks, repeated over countless mornings, shape not only daily life, but also the quiet evolution of community structures. In these early eras, routine itself becomes a source of stability and continuity. Across the region, gatherings continue to grow slightly larger as families from multiple hills participate in shared work, shared rituals, or shared discussions. These gatherings play an important role in shaping early social layers, not through hierarchy or rigid roles, but through the gradual recognition of expertise. Elders with good memory, families with reliable craftsmanship, or individuals skilled in mediating disputes naturally gain influence. This influence is gentle and unspoken. People simply begin turning to them more often, asking for advice, or inviting them to help when cooperation is required. One of the most important developments in this era is the slow emergence of central places, areas where families come together for reasons beyond simple ritual. Early on, these central spaces are nothing more than clearings, perhaps slightly elevated, perhaps near a spring, perhaps close to the boundary between two settlements. Over time, as gatherings become more frequent, families begin leaving small markers. A stone placed deliberately, a wooden post driven into the soil, or a patch of cleared ground maintained between seasons. These modest markings, barely noticeable at first, form the beginnings of what will one day become communal meeting areas. The most significant of these early central places lies on a series of hills near the Tiber, an area well suited for settlement because of its access to water, fertile surroundings, and defensible high ground. Families from nearby hills meet here more frequently than elsewhere. They meet after storms to discuss repairing paths. They meet during planting seasons to coordinate irrigation. They meet during ritual times to bring offerings to shrines. Without fully realizing it, they are slowly creating a habit of gathering in one shared region, a habit that cannot be undone once established. As this central area becomes more familiar, it begins to develop a distinct character. The ground becomes slightly more compacted from the steady movement of people. Certain routes become recognizable as well-trodden paths. A few wooden posts placed to mark gathering spots or to support simple coverings become semi-permanent fixtures. Perhaps most importantly, the area becomes associated with neutrality. No single family claims ownership over it, and all settlements treat it as communal space. This shared understanding plays a crucial role in the later development of Roman public life. Trade continues to be a steady force in shaping unity. Families exchange grains, pottery, woven textiles, simple wooden objects, and animal products. These exchanges expose them to different techniques and ideas, which gradually spread across the region. A new way of shaping pottery from one hill may become common across several communities. A particular pattern in weaving may spread from one family to another. These small cultural exchanges strengthen common identity and create the foundations of shared customs. The role of skilled individuals also expands. A potter whose clay firing method produces more durable vessels becomes sought after by neighboring families. A herder known for managing livestock during difficult seasons gains quiet respect. A woodworker who can shape sturdier beams becomes valuable during communal construction. These individuals never acquire official titles or positions, but their influence subtly shapes early social layers. Communities begin to understand that people have different strengths and that recognizing these strengths benefits everyone. At the same time, early religious practices grow more organized. While rituals remain simple and rooted in nature, families develop consistent offerings, gestures, and sequences for ceremonies. As these rituals become more standardized, they help unify the region. People become accustomed to performing the same gestures, speaking similar prayers, and assembling at similar times of the year. This repetition creates cultural cohesion that extends beyond practical cooperation. One particularly influential ritual involves seasonal transitions, especially the shift between the planting and growing periods. During these times, families gather at central shrines to offer grains or small crafted tokens. The ceremonies are quiet, but their repetition reinforces the idea that these communities share the same natural cycles and depend on similar fortunes. A poor harvest in one settlement is seen not as isolated misfortune, but as an event that concerns the broader region. This growing sense of empathy and shared experience contributes significantly to early unity. With more frequent gatherings, people begin telling stories about their ancestors, their customs, and their experiences. These stories spread slowly from hill to hill, gradually blending into a shared set of narratives. While they remain simple, they help form a sense of collective origin. A habit of storytelling strengthens inter-settlement bonds, especially when told during long evenings or communal tasks. Over time, certain figures or themes become widely known, reflecting a shared cultural imagination that predates any formal Roman identity. Evenings remain calm. After the day's work, families gather around fires that cast soft light across the interior of their huts. The crackling of wood blends with distant natural sounds, gentle breezes, the rustling of leaves, or the occasional soft call of night animals. People discuss the day, reflect on what needs to be done tomorrow, or simply sit quietly. These peaceful scenes highlight how stability and routine guided early societal development. The absence of sudden conflict or dramatic change enabled communities to focus on cooperation rather than competition. Another important development in this era is the gradual emergence of shared expectations for behavior. These expectations are not written laws. They are unwritten understandings passed down through conversation, observation, and habit. For example, families learn that disputes over land boundaries should be resolved through elder mediation rather than personal confrontation. They learn that offerings at shrines should be made respectfully and modestly. They learn that communal projects require fair contributions from everyone. These expectations form the early seeds of what will one day become customary law. Through repeated collaboration, families begin to recognize certain settlements as particularly reliable. A community that always contributes labor during path repairs earns trust. A community that consistently provides fair mediators gains respect. These reputations influence how communities interact and which individuals or groups carry more influence during larger gatherings. This does not create formal hierarchy, but it does create a gentle gradient of social standing. As shared projects grow larger and more complex, some tasks begin requiring specialized knowledge. Families with experience in stone placement, woodcraft, or storage construction gradually take on leading roles during building efforts. Again, these roles do not come with titles or authority, but they reflect growing differentiation within society. Over time, families begin storing small tools or crafted items in the central area, especially during seasons of collaboration. These stored items include woven baskets, spare pottery, or wooden poles meant for construction or ritual structures. Leaving items in the shared space indicates growing trust and marks the area as a functional center of community life. This practice reflects a quiet but significant shift in how families view shared resources. The central area eventually hosts more gatherings, sometimes planned, sometimes spontaneous. Families meet there before starting coordinated tasks. Elders convene there to discuss larger concerns. Ritual processions occasionally begin or end there. Because of these repeated uses, the area acquires a sense of continuity and importance. People begin referring to it with specific terms, identifying it as a place distinct from the surrounding hills. Such naming customs, even if informal, mark the early stages of thinking about public space, a key foundation for the political development that will eventually produce the Roman Forum. Another subtle shift occurs in gender roles and generational responsibilities. Women continue to play central roles in food preparation, textile production, and ritual offerings, while men focus more on heavy labor, tool making, and boundary-related matters. However, collaborative projects often require both men and women, especially during long tasks like harvesting or preparing communal areas. Children assist as well, learning through observation and repetition. This shared labor strengthens intergenerational bonding and ensures the continuation of customs. As time passes, the idea of a shared identity grows stronger. People begin to see themselves not just as members of individual families or settlements, but as part of a larger cultural region. They notice shared rituals, shared stories, shared work patterns, and shared expectations for behavior. This sense of belonging, although softly spoken and without political structure, becomes a crucial step toward the unity required for future political organization. By the end of this period, early Latin communities have developed. Central gathering spaces used for multiple purposes, consistent rituals that reinforce cultural unity, early social layers based on experience and reliability rather than authority, shared customs that guide behavior, coordinated labor that strengthens inter-settlement bonds, and a slowly growing sense of collective identity. These developments do not yet resemble the structured society of later Rome, but they form the deep-rooted foundation upon which that society will be built. In the next part of our calm and steady journey, we will explore how these early customs continue evolving toward more formal leadership structures and the earliest forms of centralized authority. In this 14th part of our slow and unhurried journey through early Rome, we continue observing the gradual development of social and communal structures that prefigure later political systems. By this time, the families inhabiting the hills surrounding the Tiber River have become increasingly connected through shared labor, repeated rituals, common customs, and quiet exchanges of knowledge. The communities, though still independent, are beginning to experiment with gentle forms of leadership, subtle organization, and coordinated projects that require more than just familial cooperation. Life follows its familiar rhythm. Morning light touches the terracotta roofs and soft circular huts, and the day begins with careful, unhurried motions. Someone fetches water, someone tends the fields, someone checks on livestock, and someone prepares a simple morning meal from grains, bread, and perhaps small fruits or olives. The repetition of these tasks, though seemingly mundane, forms the basis for stable social structure. Families move predictably, pathways are well-worn, and the air is filled with the quiet sounds of daily life, soft footsteps, distant bird calls, and the rustling of leaves in the early breeze. The most notable development in this period is the emergence of early leadership roles, though they are very different from formal authority. Leadership is not imposed or claimed. It arises quietly as families recognize certain individuals who are skilled at organizing work, mediating disputes, or maintaining knowledge about shared rituals, construction methods, or agricultural techniques. These leaders are respected, not feared. Their influence is the result of repeated demonstration of competence and fairness, not formal decree. Families naturally turn to them for guidance, advice, or coordination of collective efforts. Councils continue to meet regularly at central gathering spaces, which have now become more established. The paths to these areas are cleared more carefully, and markers, often simple stones or wooden posts, indicate the routes and boundaries. These spaces are used for both work and ritual. Elders, often the same individuals who have gained informal recognition as leaders, preside over discussions, though their role is to facilitate rather than command. Topics discussed range from the maintenance of shared paths, irrigation channels, and storage pits, to planning for seasonal rituals, ensuring fair distribution of resources, and coordinating labor for construction projects. All decisions are reached through patient conversation and quiet consensus. Environmental management remains a central concern. Seasonal rains and occasional floods continue to affect the fertility and usability of fields. Communities respond by maintaining drainage channels, reinforcing embankments, and sharing knowledge about effective irrigation practices. These projects often involve multiple families from different settlements, working together over extended periods. The labor is repetitive, careful, and methodical, requiring coordination and sustained effort. As families cooperate, trust deepens, and the subtle social hierarchy based on skill and reliability becomes more apparent. Trade also reinforces community cohesion. Families exchange surplus grains, pottery, woven textiles, simple wooden tools, and animal products. These exchanges happen regularly, often along familiar paths that connect multiple settlements. The slow and steady movement of goods allows ideas, techniques, and customs to diffuse across the region. For example, a new pottery technique observed in one settlement may gradually become common in neighboring settlements. A weaving pattern or method of constructing simple tools may spread in a similar manner. These exchanges, though small and incremental, contribute significantly to a shared material and cultural identity. Rituals continue to guide life. Seasonal gatherings, offerings to household and field deities, and ceremonial preparations for planting and harvesting reinforce social bonds. Offerings are simple: grains, bread, small tokens, or handcrafted objects, but they are repeated consistently, creating continuity and a sense of stability. Families from multiple settlements participate, reinforcing the sense that the communities share a common world. Over time, the repetition of rituals standardizes practices and creates a collective memory that shapes early cultural norms. Marriage patterns further integrate the communities. Families increasingly arrange unions that connect settlements, and individuals moving to new homes bring knowledge, skills, and customs with them. This movement facilitates the slow blending of traditions, including ritual practices, crafting techniques, and food preparation methods. As generations pass, these customs become shared across the region, creating cultural cohesion without the need for formal laws or centralized authority. Children grow up immersed in this interconnected environment. They observe adults coordinating labor, mediating disputes, and performing rituals. They participate in simple tasks, learning skills and social expectations through observation and repetition. By the time they reach adulthood, these young members of the community understand not only their familial responsibilities, but also the broader communal practices that ensure collective survival and prosperity. Craftsmanship advances quietly but steadily. Pottery shapes become more refined, tools more durable, wooden structures more stable. These innovations are subtle, learned through practice, observation, and instruction rather than invention. And as these improvements spread, material culture across settlements becomes increasingly consistent. Residents begin to recognize familiar techniques and objects in neighboring communities, reinforcing a sense of shared culture and identity. Central gathering spaces evolve further. The compaction of the soil from repeated foot traffic, the careful clearing of brush, and the placement of wooden posts or stone markers give these areas a more permanent feel. Families bring tools, crafted items, and other objects that support communal projects or rituals. The spaces serve multiple functions as venues for meetings, work coordination, rituals, and occasionally as temporary storage for resources or tools. Their repeated use establishes continuity and a sense of shared ownership, though no single family claims authority over them. Gender roles will remain stable but flexible. Women continue to manage food preparation, textiles, and ritual offerings, but they also participate in communal labor, particularly in tasks that benefit from cooperative effort, such as harvesting or construction. Men focus on heavy labor, toolmaking, and managing boundaries or irrigation systems, but they too assist in ritual preparation or communal activities when needed. Children assist adults in age-appropriate ways, contributing to the continuity of skills, customs, and social norms. Over time, families begin to establish shared expectations for behavior, forming early precedents for customary law. Disputes are resolved through mediation rather than conflict. Contributions to communal projects are expected, but negotiated gently, and respect for ritual and tradition becomes central. These unwritten norms help maintain stability and reduce friction between settlements, strengthening cohesion and trust. Reputation and reliability grow in importance. Families or individuals known for consistent contribution, fairness, or skill gain influence during collaborative projects and ritual gatherings. While influence remains informal and consensus-driven, it shapes decision-making subtly. This gradient of respect and recognition forms the foundation for more formal social and political structures that will emerge in later centuries. The landscape itself reinforces communal identity. Certain hills, streams, and clearings become landmarks that carry shared meaning. Repeated use of these sites for work, ritual, and social interaction embeds them into collective memory. Children and adults alike internalize the significance of these locations, linking physical space with social cohesion and cultural continuity. By the end of this period, early Latin communities have developed. Informal leadership based on skill and reliability, consistent and shared rituals that create cultural unity, central gathering spaces used for multiple social, work, and ritual functions, coordinated labor projects that enhance environmental management and infrastructure, cultural exchange through trade, marriage, and craft practices, and unwritten expectations that guide behavior, mediate disputes, and maintain trust. These developments, subtle and incremental, lay the groundwork for the more structured political organization that will eventually arise in Rome. Communities have not yet formed formal government, but they now possess the social, cultural, and material foundations to support it. The quiet patience, steady cooperation, and careful observation of daily life prepare these early settlements for future growth. In the next part of our journey, we will explore how the foundations of leadership, central gathering places, and communal cooperation begin transitioning toward the earliest formal institutions, setting the stage for Rome's first recognized kings and the beginnings of urban organization. In this 15th part of our slow and deliberate journey through early Rome, we continue observing the subtle developments that gradually shape communal life, social cohesion, and early governance structures. The families living on the hills near the Tiber have, over many generations, developed habits of cooperation, shared ritual practice, and communal labor. These quiet patterns of everyday life laid the groundwork for the more formal structures that would emerge centuries later, even before the first kings would take their places in Roman history. Morning begins in the same measured fashion. The first light illuminates circular huts and gently warms the fields. People rise, attending to tasks that follow familiar patterns. Water is fetched from the nearest springs or wells, livestock are tended, fields are inspected, and meals are prepared from stored grains, fresh vegetables, and occasionally small fruits or nuts. The repetition of these routines creates stability and predictability, enabling communities to coordinate larger efforts without chaos or confusion. One of the most significant developments in this period is the refinement of coordinated communal projects. The early channels, paths, and storage facilities have proven useful, but as families and settlements become more connected, larger projects begin to appear. For example, the construction of more robust communal granaries requires careful planning, material collection, and multifamily labor. Stones must be gathered, clay prepared, wooden posts cut, and floors leveled. These projects may extend over weeks or months, necessitating patience, quiet organization, and cooperative problem solving. Leadership continues to be informal but increasingly recognized. Elders who demonstrate skill in organizing labor, resolving disputes, or guiding rituals gain the trust of multiple settlements. Their role is advisory and facilitative, not coercive. Families naturally defer to them when collective decisions are required, such as determining how much labor each family contributes to a shared project, or how surplus goods are distributed to ensure fairness. Through repeated experience, these elders develop a subtle authority that depends entirely on reputation, competence, and consistency. Trade plays a gentle but persistent role in fostering unity. Surplus grain, woven textiles, crafted pottery, and wooden implements move along familiar paths between settlements. These exchanges are routine and predictable, enabling families to observe each other's habits, skills, and reliability. Over time, they create interdependence. The slow circulation of goods spreads techniques, small innovations, and cultural practices, strengthening a shared identity across hills and valleys. Ritual practices also consolidate during this period. Seasonal ceremonies for planting, harvest, and transitional periods become more standardized. Families attend with predictable regularity, offering grains, small crafted objects, or other modest tokens. Ritual gestures, spoken prayers, and the timing of ceremonies become increasingly aligned across settlements, Repetition creates consistency, and consistency fosters a sense of shared culture. Even subtle aspects, such as the placement of offerings or the sequence of gestures, become common knowledge, embedding cultural norms into daily life. Marriage patterns continue to integrate settlements. Families arrange unions that link distant hills, bringing skills, stories, and practices with them. Individuals moving to new homes help blend customs, spreading knowledge about farming techniques, tool making, or ritual preparation. Over generations, these subtle exchanges create a unified cultural framework, laying the foundation for a regional identity that transcends individual settlements. Children grow up immersed in this network of interaction. They participate in daily routines, observe elders, assist in communal labor, and attend rituals. Through these experiences, they learn not only practical skills, but also the social expectations, cooperative norms, and shared stories that bind communities together. By the time they reach adulthood, they have internalized a sense of belonging that encompasses multiple settlements rather than a single household. Craftsmanship continues to advance in quiet, incremental ways. Pottery shapes become more standardized, wooden tools more functional, and textile patterns more consistent. Innovation spreads slowly through observation and imitation. Recognizing familiar techniques or objects in neighboring settlements reinforces a sense of shared culture and identity. These minor improvements, repeated across generations, enhance both practical life and social cohesion. Central gathering spaces further solidify. The clearing or elevated area used for work, rituals, and meetings is maintained with care. Paths leading to the space are cleared regularly. Markers indicate key points, and families contribute objects or tools to facilitate communal projects. These areas become focal points not only for practical activities, but also for social interaction, storytelling, and the reinforcement of norms. By repeatedly returning to the same central place, communities establish continuity and a subtle sense of collective ownership. Gender roles remain largely consistent but flexible. Women continue to manage food preparation, textiles, and ritual contributions, yet they participate in communal labor, especially during planting, harvest, or construction activities. Men focus on heavier tasks such as clearing land, moving materials, or maintaining infrastructure, but they too participate in ritual preparation and community coordination. Children assist adults in age-appropriate ways, absorbing knowledge, customs, and social expectations. Intergenerational cooperation becomes a defining feature of early society. Shared expectations of behavior, sometimes called customary norms, become more explicit. Disputes over land boundaries, labor contributions, or resource use are resolved through consultation and mediation rather than conflict. Fairness and reliability are emphasized, and repeated adherence to these norms strengthens trust. Families begin to judge one another not only by practical skill, but also by reputation for integrity and helpfulness. These quiet standards of conduct prepare the way for more formal governance structures that will appear in later generations. The landscape continues to influence social and cultural development. Certain hills provide views for monitoring rainfall or observing approaching groups. Streams offer irrigation and water access, and clearings serve as reliable gathering points. Over time, families develop shared knowledge of these features, integrating them into daily routines and cooperative projects. This subtle understanding of the environment reinforces a sense of belonging and responsibility that spans multiple settlements. Over successive years, the central areas, collaborative projects, and coordinated labor efforts give rise to the earliest forms of social stratification. Influence is not rigid or codified, but families and individuals recognized for consistent skill, fairness, or leadership gain subtle authority in decision-making. Others contribute labor, knowledge, or goods, and all roles are respected as necessary to maintain communal balance. This soft stratification ensures that important tasks are completed efficiently while avoiding conflict or coercion. Trade, ritual, and marriage continue to bind the region. Exchanges of goods and practices reinforce trust and interdependence, while ritual gatherings provide occasions for reflection, storytelling, and the reinforcement of collective memory. Over time, these slow, deliberate processes create a cohesive identity that encompasses multiple settlements. Although no formal state exists yet, the groundwork for political and social organization is steadily forming. By the end of this period, early Latin communities have established consistent informal leadership based on skill and reputation, coordinated communal projects, shared central spaces used for labor, rituals, and gatherings, standardized ritual practices across settlements, integrated marriage networks spreading skills and customs, intergenerational transmission of knowledge and norms, subtle social stratification based on reliability and skill, and unwritten customary rules that guide cooperation, dispute resolution, and daily behavior. These developments represent a quiet but essential evolution. Communities remain small and largely autonomous, but they now possess the capacity to undertake complex projects, maintain consistent social order, and transmit culture across generations. The foundations of governance, civic identity, and cooperative infrastructure are firmly in place, setting the stage for the emergence of Rome's earliest formal political institutions and kings. In the next part, we will examine how these early systems and social foundations gradually transition toward more formalized leadership, central authority, and the early urbanization that will mark the dawn of Rome's first organized political era. In this 16th part of our calm and methodical exploration of early Rome, we continue examining the subtle developments that gradually shape communities, leadership, and social organization long before the construction of formal political institutions. By this stage, families across the hills near the Tiber River have grown increasingly interconnected, not through dramatic events, wars, or sudden innovation, but through repeated quiet practices, collaborative labor, ritual continuity, exchange of goods, and shared norms. These foundations, though unassuming, were essential to the emergence of more formal structures that would define early Rome. Morning begins predictably. The first light strikes the soft, earthy rooftops of the round huts, illuminating the surrounding fields and pathways. Families rise slowly, engaging in routine tasks with practiced precision. Water is drawn from wells or nearby streams, animals are fed, and meals are prepared from stored grains, occasional fruits, and simple dairy products. The quiet repetition of these routines is central to communal stability. It allows for the coordination of larger, more complex activities without confusion or conflict. Daily life, while monotonous to outsiders, forms the rhythm upon which all social structures rely. One of the most important aspects of this era is the gradual refinement of leadership and coordination. Elders who have consistently demonstrated skill in organizing communal projects, mediating disputes, or maintaining ritual knowledge are now widely recognized as leaders. Their authority is informal but meaningful. Families seek their advice before beginning projects, during seasonal rituals, or when negotiating resource use. These leaders are respected for competence and fairness rather than inherited status or force. Influence is subtle and consensus-driven, and the community acknowledges it without formal decree. Central gathering spaces continue to play a key role in organizing society. These areas, often clearings on gentle hills or near water sources, are now carefully maintained. Repeated foot traffic compacts the soil, wooden posts mark important locations, and families contribute tools, materials, and occasional crafted items for communal use. These spaces serve multiple purposes: coordinating labor, hosting rituals, storing surplus goods, and facilitating inter-settlement gatherings. Over time, the repeated use of central spaces creates a sense of continuity and shared ownership, even in the absence of formal property rights. Coordinated labor has expanded to encompass more ambitious projects. For example, the construction of larger communal granaries, extended drainage channels, and reinforced pathways now involves multiple families from different settlements. The work requires careful planning, sustained effort, and clear division of tasks. Stones are moved, posts are cut and shaped, clay and mud are prepared, and soil is leveled methodically. Labor is deliberate and unhurried, ensuring precision and durability. The repetition of these activities fosters trust and builds social cohesion as families learn to depend on one another to complete essential projects. Trade remains a vital, though gentle, force for uniting communities. Families exchange grains, livestock, crafted pottery, textiles, and tools along well-worn paths. These exchanges are routine and predictable, allowing families to observe one another's reliability, craftsmanship, and habits. Over time, this regular exchange spreads techniques, minor innovations, and cultural practices across settlements. Pottery shapes, weaving patterns, and tool designs gradually become standardized, creating a sense of material and cultural unity. The slow circulation of goods is matched by the circulation of ideas and customs, further solidifying inter-settlement bonds. Rituals continue to reinforce social cohesion. Seasonal ceremonies, particularly those associated with planting, harvest, and transitional points in the year, become increasingly standardized. Families attend predictably, offering grains, small crafted objects, and modest tokens. Gestures, prayers, and the sequence of actions are increasingly aligned across settlements. Repetition ensures that rituals are familiar to all participants, creating stability and shared cultural memory. Even subtle aspects, such as the arrangement of offerings or the timing of ceremonial actions, are now widely recognized and consistently observed. Marriage practices continue to link settlements, blending families and facilitating cultural exchange. Individuals moving to new communities bring with them skills, stories, and knowledge of customs. Over successive generations, these exchanges unify practices related to agriculture, construction, ritual, and daily life. Children growing up in these integrated communities learn a sense of belonging that extends beyond their immediate household, absorbing both practical knowledge and the cultural norms of a wider network. Children are integral to maintaining social continuity. They assist in daily routines, observe elders, participate in rituals, and gradually take on more responsibility as they mature. Through repeated practice, they learn both the skills necessary for survival and the social expectations that maintain cohesion. By adolescence, they understand communal labor patterns, ritual sequences, and the unwritten rules that guide behavior. This intergenerational learning ensures that knowledge, skill, and social norms are reliably transmitted, securing the foundation of early community life. Craftsmanship advances slowly and deliberately. Pottery becomes more refined, tools become sturdier and more ergonomic, and wooden constructions grow more stable. These improvements are transmitted through observation, imitation, and instruction rather than sudden invention. Recognition of familiar techniques and objects in neighboring settlements strengthens social bonds and shared identity. Gradual refinement of material culture ensures both practical efficiency and the reinforcement of cultural cohesion. Gender roles remain relatively stable, but exhibit flexibility. Women continue to manage food preparation, textiles, and ritual contributions, while also participating in labor-intensive communal tasks when necessary. Men focus primarily on heavier labor, including moving materials, maintaining infrastructure, and managing irrigation systems, though they, too, contribute to rituals and cooperative projects. Children assist adults according to age and capability, gradually absorbing skills, customs, and social norms. This cooperative framework ensures continuity and prepares younger generations for future leadership and participation. The emergence of unwritten social norms becomes increasingly pronounced. Families recognize the importance of fairness in communal projects, reliability in labor contributions, and respect in dispute resolution. These expectations, though not codified, provide a framework for maintaining order and cooperation. Families judged to be consistently helpful or fair gain subtle influence in collective decisions. Reputation becomes a vital currency, guiding interactions and reinforcing community cohesion without formal enforcement. The landscape continues to shape social organization. Certain hills provide vantage points for observing weather, movement, or potential threats. Streams and springs offer vital water resources. Clearings become known gathering spaces, and their repeated use embeds them with shared meaning. Families develop a collective understanding of the terrain, aligning labor, ritual, and travel with environmental features. This knowledge is transmitted across generations, reinforcing both practical efficiency and a shared sense of identity tied to the land. As settlements grow more interdependent, the early forms of social stratification emerge. Influence is subtle and informal, based on skill, reliability, and contribution to communal projects rather than inherited status. Families or individuals recognized for consistent competence gain informal authority during collaborative efforts and ritual gatherings. The gradient of influence ensures that essential tasks are completed efficiently while preserving communal harmony and fairness. Trade, ritual, and marriage reinforce inter-settlement cohesion. Regular exchanges of goods, skills, and customs, combined with repeated participation in rituals, strengthen mutual trust. Communities gradually perceive themselves not as isolated groups, but as interconnected parts of a wider region. This sense of collective identity, rooted in shared experience and cooperation, forms the basis for more formalized governance structures that will emerge in later centuries. By the end of this stage, early Latin communities have developed, recognized informal leaders based on skill, reliability, and fairness. Sophisticated coordination of communal labor and construction projects. Central gathering spaces for work, ritual, and social interaction. Standardized rituals across multiple settlements. Integration of marriage networks fostering cultural exchange. Intergenerational knowledge transfer. Subtle social stratification based on contribution and reliability. And unwritten norms guiding cooperation, dispute resolution, and behavior. These developments mark a gradual but essential transformation. Communities remain autonomous, yet they now possess the social, cultural, and organizational capacity to manage larger projects, maintain order, and transmit knowledge reliably. The stage is set for the emergence of early centralized authority and the gradual urbanization that will define the next phase of Roman history. In the next part, we will explore how these quiet foundations, refined over generations, transition toward more formal leadership, early political institutions, and the initial urban planning that signals the beginnings of Rome as a centralized entity. In this 17th part of our gradual and unhurried exploration of early Rome, we observe the subtle yet significant steps by which communities slowly began moving toward centralized leadership, integrated rituals, and the earliest forms of urban planning. Life continues its repetitive rhythm across the hills near the Tiber River, yet beneath this quiet daily routine, remarkable developments are occurring, almost imperceptibly, that will lay the groundwork for future Roman civilization. Mornings follow their familiar pattern. Light slowly touches the soft terracotta roofs of round huts, illuminating the pathways and surrounding fields. Families rise gently, performing tasks that have become habitual over generations. Water is drawn from wells or streams, livestock are tended with quiet diligence, and grains are prepared for morning meals. These daily routines, repeated without haste, establish the stability necessary for more complex social and communal coordination. The repetition of work, ritual, and interaction creates an invisible network of continuity across settlements. One of the most important developments in this period is the further refinement of leadership and informal governance structures. Elders who have consistently demonstrated skill in organizing communal projects, mediating disputes, or preserving ritual knowledge are now widely acknowledged as central figures in multiple settlements. Their authority, though informal, carries weight. Families defer to them when planning labor for construction, distributing resources, or organizing seasonal ceremonies. Influence is earned through competence, fairness, and experience, rather than through inherited status or coercion. These leaders form the earliest frameworks for civic organization, gently guiding communities toward coordination without formalized law. Central gathering spaces continue to grow in importance. Clearings on hills near springs or along small valleys are now deliberately maintained. Paths leading to these spaces are cleared, markers indicate significant locations, and families bring tools, materials, or offerings to support communal activities. These areas serve multiple purposes. They are meeting points for coordination, sites for rituals, storage locations for shared resources, and venues for storytelling and teaching. Repeated use of these spaces strengthens collective memory, providing a sense of continuity and shared ownership that transcends individual settlements. Coordinated labor projects become increasingly ambitious and methodical. Larger communal granaries, reinforced pathways, irrigation channels, and simple defensive structures now involve multiple families from different settlements working together for extended periods. Stones are gathered and shaped, posts are cut and positioned, clay and mud are carefully prepared, and soil is leveled with precision. The labor is deliberate, abundant, and repeated. Doesn't have mosque, tiered and patient, emphasizing quality and durability over speed. Through these projects, families build trust, refine coordination skills, and internalize norms of shared responsibility and fairness. Trade remains a quiet but persistent force for uniting communities. Surplus grains, livestock, crafted pottery, textiles, and tools circulate along well-trodden paths connecting multiple settlements. The predictability of these exchanges allows families to observe the reliability, skill, and integrity of one another. Over time, these exchanges disseminate techniques, innovations, and cultural practices across the region. Pottery forms become standardized, weaving patterns spread widely, and tool designs converge. These slow movements of goods and ideas cultivate both practical efficiency and shared cultural identity, reinforcing interdependence among settlements. Ritual practices continue to consolidate and integrate. Seasonal ceremonies, particularly those associated with planting, harvest, and key transitional periods, become increasingly standardized. Families participate predictably, offering grains, handcrafted tokens, and other modest tributes. Ritual gestures, spoken prayers, and sequences of action are performed with growing consistency across settlements. Repetition of rituals not only strengthens cultural memory, but also fosters social cohesion, as participants recognize shared practices and expectations. Even minor details, such as the order of offerings or the positioning of objects, become widely understood and respected, reinforcing the sense of a shared cultural framework. Marriage practices remain a vital instrument of social integration. Families arrange unions linking distant settlements, transferring skills, knowledge, and customs along with individuals. Over successive generations, these exchanges unify practices related to agriculture, construction, rituals, and daily life. Children born into these integrated communities acquire a sense of belonging that spans multiple households, absorbing knowledge, routines, and social norms that will later support more complex communal organization. Children's roles in the community continue to expand. They participate in daily routines, assist elders, attend rituals, and gradually learn to contribute to labor projects. Through repeated observation and practice, they internalize the social norms, cooperative behaviors, and practical skills necessary for community survival. By adolescence, they are familiar with ritual sequences, labor coordination, dispute resolution, and the subtle expectations that guide interactions between families. This consistent intergenerational transmission of knowledge and custom ensures continuity, stability, and preparedness for future leadership. Craftsmanship sees gradual advancement. Pottery becomes more uniform, tools more functional and durable, and wooden structures are constructed with increased stability. Techniques are transmitted through observation, imitation, and direct teaching. Communities recognize familiar designs and methods across settlements, fostering a sense of shared cultural identity and cohesion. These subtle improvements, repeated over generations, enhance both the efficiency of daily life and the strength of social bonds. Gender roles remain relatively stable but adaptable. Women manage food preparation, textiles, and ritual offerings, while also contributing to communal labor during harvests, construction, or major projects. Men focus on heavier labor, tool making, and maintenance of pathways, boundaries, and irrigation, though they too participate in ritual preparation and cooperative tasks. Children assist adults in age-appropriate ways, learning both practical skills and social expectations. This system of cooperative intergenerational labor reinforces continuity, stability, and skill transmission. Unwritten social norms or customary expectations become increasingly significant. Families understand the importance of fairness, reliability, and respect in both labor and ritual contexts. Disputes over boundaries, contributions, or ritual observances are resolved through mediation, consensus, and gentle negotiation. Reputation emerges as a key measure of trustworthiness and influence. Families consistently contributing skill, labor, or fairness gain subtle authority in decision-making. This soft stratification promotes both efficiency and social harmony, preparing communities for more formal governance structures in the future. The landscape itself plays a crucial role in social organization. Certain hills provide observation points, streams supply water and irrigation, and clearings serve as reliable gathering spots. Knowledge of these features, transmitted across generations, shapes the organization of labor, ritual, and travel. The physical environment becomes intertwined with social identity, reinforcing both practical coordination and cultural cohesion. By now, early Latin communities have developed. Recognized informal leaders valued for skill, fairness, and reliability. Sophisticated coordination of multi-family labor projects, central gathering spaces maintained for work, ritual, and social exchange. Standardized rituals unifying multiple settlements, integrated marriage networks that transmit skills and customs, intergenerational learning of social norms, practices, and practical skills, subtle social stratification based on competence and contribution, and unwritten rules guiding cooperation, dispute resolution, and communal harmony. In addition to these achievements, we begin to see the first signs of urban organization. Paths become more regular, central areas more formally demarcated, and specific zones within settlements begin to take on specialized functions, whether for storage, ritual, or labor coordination. These early organizational steps are slow, incremental, and subtle, yet they foreshadow the more structured urban planning and civic architecture that will emerge as Rome grows into a centralized city. By the end of this period, the region has achieved a remarkable balance of autonomy, cohesion, and latent organization. Families retain independence, yet they participate in shared rituals, coordinated labor, and cooperative governance. Leaders are respected for merit rather than coercion. Knowledge, skill, and cultural practices flow smoothly across generations and settlements. Trust, fairness, and reputation guide interactions, creating stability without formal legal structures. The foundations are set for centralized leadership, early institutions, and the urbanization that will define Rome's initial political era. In the next part, we will observe how these carefully cultivated social, cultural, and organizational foundations begin transitioning toward formalized leadership roles, the earliest political institutions, and the first real structures of centralized urban life. In this 18th part of our gradual, meticulous journey through early Rome, we focus on the subtle processes by which communities began consolidating authority, expanding ritual networks, and experimenting with the earliest forms of civic structure. Life along the gentle hills surrounding the Tiber River remains calm and repetitive. Yet beneath this quiet rhythm, small but consequential changes are gradually preparing the region for centralized governance, larger social networks, and early urban organization. Morning begins as it has for generations. The first light filters through terracotta rooftops, illuminating round huts, pathways, and cultivated fields. Families awaken slowly, attending to habitual tasks that structure daily life. Water is drawn from wells or springs, livestock are tended, and meals of grains, bread, dairy, and occasionally fruits or nuts are prepared. These seemingly monotonous routines establish the stability that makes larger projects and complex social organization possible. Repetition fosters familiarity, reliability, and a rhythm that guides community life across generations. One of the most notable developments during this period is the gradual consolidation of authority. Elders who consistently demonstrate competence, fairness, and organizational skill are increasingly recognized as central figures within multiple settlements. Their authority, though still informal, influences decisions regarding labor allocation, resource management, and ritual coordination. These leaders do not command by force, instead, their guidance is sought and respected. Consensus, reputation, and demonstrated skill remain the foundations of influence. Through repeated cycles of collaboration and careful negotiation, communities gradually refine the mechanisms by which leadership operates. Central gathering spaces, already significant, are further enhanced. Clearings on hills, near water, or along accessible paths are deliberately maintained, and foot traffic compacts the soil. Wooden posts and stones mark key locations, indicating boundaries, ritual zones, and areas for communal labor. Families bring tools, resources, and crafted items to support collective work. These central areas now serve multiple functions: meeting points for coordination, venues for rituals, storage locations for shared goods, and sites for inter-settlement gatherings. And repeated use and careful maintenance embed these spaces with meaning, creating continuity and a sense of shared ownership that spans generations. Coordinated labor projects grow in scale and sophistication. Communities construct larger granaries, reinforced pathways, expanded irrigation channels, and more durable structures. Stones are gathered and shaped, clay and mud are carefully prepared, and wooden posts are cut and positioned with precision. Projects may last weeks or months, requiring patience, meticulous effort, and collaboration between multiple families. These repeated activities foster trust, strengthen communal bonds, and ensure that knowledge of labor techniques and resource management is transmitted across generations. Trade remains a steady, gentle force for uniting settlements. Surplus grain, livestock, pottery, textiles, and tools move predictably along established paths connecting multiple communities. This regular exchange enables families to observe the reliability, skill, and fairness of others. Techniques and minor innovations spread incrementally. Pottery forms become standardized, weaving patterns propagate, and tool designs converge. Cultural practices, ceremonial observances, and shared stories also diffuse alongside goods. These slow exchanges cultivate a shared regional identity, reinforcing interdependence and collective cohesion. Ritual practices continue to unify communities. Seasonal ceremonies associated with planting, harvest, and key transitional periods become increasingly synchronized across settlements. Families participate consistently, offering grains, handcrafted objects, or modest tokens. Gestures, prayers, and ceremonial sequences are performed with growing precision and uniformity. Repetition fosters familiarity and shared understanding, embedding cultural memory within and across communities. Even subtle details, the order of offerings, the placement of objects, and the sequence of gestures, are recognized and consistently respected. Ritual becomes a vital tool for reinforcing collective identity and social stability. Marriage practices maintain their role as a unifying force. Families arrange unions that link distant settlements, transmitting skills, knowledge, and customs. Over generations, these connections unify practices related to agriculture, construction, rituals, and daily life. Children born into these integrated networks acquire a sense of belonging that transcends individual households. Inter-settlement mobility fosters cultural exchange, consolidates knowledge, and strengthens the foundation for more complex social organization. Children play an essential role in sustaining community knowledge and practice. They assist in daily routines, observe elders, participate in labor projects, and attend rituals. Through repeated observation and participation, they learn practical skills, social norms, and cooperative behaviors. By adolescence, they understand the rhythms of labor, ritual, and governance, and they are capable of contributing meaningfully to communal projects. Intergenerational transmission of knowledge ensures continuity, preserves tradition, and prepares the next generation for leadership roles. Craftsmanship continues to advance incrementally. Pottery becomes more uniform, wooden structures gain durability, and tools grow increasingly functional. Techniques are transmitted through observation, imitation, and direct instruction. Families recognize familiar designs and methods in neighboring settlements, fostering shared cultural identity. Gradual improvements in material culture support both practical efficiency and social cohesion. Gender roles remain relatively stable but flexible. Women manage food preparation, textiles, and ritual offerings, while also participating in communal labor during planting, harvest, or construction. Men focus primarily on heavier labor, including moving materials, maintaining infrastructure, and managing irrigation systems, yet they too participate in rituals and cooperative projects. Children assist adults according to age and ability, absorbing practical knowledge and social expectations. Intergenerational cooperation is essential to the continuity, stability, and cohesion of early society. Unwritten norms, increasingly codified through repetition and social expectation, guide behavior. Fairness in labor, reliability in contribution, and respect in dispute resolution are recognized as central principles. Disputes are resolved through mediation, negotiation, and consensus. Families with consistent contributions and integrity gain subtle influence, shaping collective decisions without coercion. This soft stratification ensures the efficient completion of projects while preserving social harmony and trust. The landscape continues to influence organization. Hills provide observation points, streams supply water and irrigation, and clearings serve as communal hubs. Knowledge of these environmental features shapes labor, ritual, and travel. Over generations, the landscape becomes entwined with social and cultural identity, embedding practical and symbolic meaning into the daily life of the community. As settlements become more interdependent, early forms of social stratification consolidate. Influence is subtle and consensus-driven, based on competence and reliability rather than inheritance or coercion. Families or individuals known for skill, fairness, or leadership gradually assume more responsibility during communal projects and ritual gatherings. Reputation, skill, and consistent contribution become the currency of authority, ensuring that projects are completed efficiently and peacefully. Trade, ritual, and marriage collectively reinforce inter-settlement cohesion. Regular exchange of goods, knowledge, and customs, combined with repeated ritual participation, cultivates trust and shared identity. Communities begin to perceive themselves not as isolated settlements, but as interconnected parts of a larger, cohesive region. This sense of collective belonging forms the foundation for formal governance, civic planning, and urban organization. By this stage, early Latin communities have achieved informal but widely respected leadership based on skill, reliability, and fairness. Coordinated labor across multiple settlements for large-scale projects. Central gathering spaces for work, ritual, and social exchange. Standardized rituals unifying settlements. Integrated marriage networks fostering cultural exchange. Intergenerational knowledge transfer. Subtle social stratification. Unwritten norms guiding cooperation, dispute resolution, and communal harmony. And early experimentation with spatial organization, including designated zones for labor, storage, and ritual activity. These developments mark a profound transformation. Communities retain autonomy, yet are capable of complex coordination, reliable governance, and sustained cultural continuity. Social, cultural, and environmental foundations now support the transition towards centralized leadership, formalized institutions, and urban planning. Subtle yet powerful changes in leadership, labor organization, ritual standardization, and cultural integration are laying the groundwork for Rome's first organized urban centers. In the next part, we will examine how these foundations evolve into early centralized leadership, the emergence of proto-governmental institutions, and the beginnings of structured urban life that will define Rome's initial political and civic era. In this 19th part of our slow and deliberate journey through early Rome, we observe the gradual emergence of centralized leadership, the nascent formation of proto-institutions, and the early steps towards structured urban life. Life along the Tiber continues its quiet, rhythmic pattern, yet beneath this calm surface, subtle shifts are consolidating communities, formalizing authority, and laying the groundwork for the Rome that will later rise to prominence. Morning begins predictably. First light touches the soft roofs of round huts and the pathways that connect settlements, casting long shadows over cultivated fields and streams. Families rise methodically, attending to habitual tasks. Water is drawn from wells and springs. Livestock are tended with careful attention. Grains, bread, and occasional fruits or dairy are prepared for breakfast. These routines, repeated over generations, create the stability necessary for more complex forms of cooperation and leadership to emerge. The predictable rhythm of daily life fosters continuity, reliability, and cohesion. forming an invisible network binding settlements together. One of the most notable developments in this era is the emergence of centralized leadership within clusters of settlements. Elders who have repeatedly demonstrated competence, fairness, and organizational skill gain broader recognition. Their influence spans multiple settlements, guiding labor coordination, resource allocation, and ritual practice. Leadership is informal but increasingly acknowledged. Families defer to these central figures for advice and coordination, seeking consensus rather than obeying force. Through patient repetition of collaborative projects, negotiation, and mediation, these leaders establish subtle yet stable mechanisms of governance that will gradually evolve into formalized institutions. Central gathering spaces grow increasingly sophisticated. Elevated clearings, well-maintained paths, and designated areas for specific communal activities are now common. Wooden posts, stones, and simple markers denote boundaries, work areas, and ritual zones. These spaces serve multiple functions: coordinating labor, hosting rituals, storing surplus resources, and providing venues for inter-settlement meetings. Repeated use and maintenance of these areas strengthen collective memory, embedding a sense of continuity, shared ownership, and responsibility across generations. Labor coordination reaches a new level of organization. Large-scale projects, including granaries, reinforced pathways, irrigation channels, and storage facilities, now require precise planning and multifamily collaboration. Stones are cut and shaped, posts are positioned methodically, and clay or mud is carefully prepared for construction. Work may extend over weeks or months, emphasizing patience, precision, and durability. These labor projects foster trust, refine organizational skills, and teach families to rely on one another, consolidating social cohesion across settlements. Trade continues as a subtle but persistent unifying force. Surplus grain, livestock, crafted pottery, textiles, and tools circulate along predictable routes, linking settlements economically and socially. Families observe the reliability, skill, and fairness of neighbors through repeated exchanges. Incremental dissemination of techniques and innovations occurs. Pottery shapes standardize, weaving patterns spread, and tool designs converge. Cultural practices, ceremonial knowledge, and oral traditions also move across settlements. These slow, steady exchanges nurture a shared regional identity, reinforce interdependence, and cultivate the early sense of a civic community. Ritual practices evolve further, becoming more structured and integrated. Seasonal ceremonies associated with the planting, harvest, and transitional periods are now synchronized across multiple settlements. Families participate predictably, offering grains, handcrafted items, or symbolic tokens. Gestures, spoken prayers, and ceremonial sequences are increasingly uniform. Repetition ensures familiarity and shared understanding, embedding cultural memory into the fabric of community life. Even minor details, such as the order of offerings or placement of objects, are standardized and widely respected. Ritual now serves as both a spiritual practice and a tool for social cohesion. Marriage practices continue to unify settlements. Families arrange unions linking distant communities, transmitting skills, customs, and cultural knowledge. Over successive generations, these unions create networks of interdependence, consolidating practices related to agriculture, construction, and ritual observance. Children born into these integrated networks acquire a sense of belonging that spans multiple households, internalizing practical knowledge, social norms, and cooperative behaviors that support emerging civic structures. Children play an essential role in sustaining continuity. They assist with daily routines, participate in labor, observe rituals, and learn social norms. Through repeated observation and hands-on practice, they acquire both practical skills and an understanding of cooperative behavior. By adolescence, they are familiar with labor coordination, ritual sequences, and dispute resolution. Intergenerational knowledge transfer ensures the survival of technical, social, and cultural practices necessary for the community's continued development. Craftsmanship continues to advance. Pottery becomes increasingly uniform and functional, wooden structures more durable, and tools more efficient. Techniques are taught through observation, imitation, and instruction, with recognition of familiar designs fostering shared identity across settlements. These gradual improvements strengthen both practical efficiency and cultural cohesion, reinforcing trust and collaboration among neighboring communities. Gender roles remain relatively stable but flexible. Women oversee food preparation, textile production, and ritual offerings while contributing to communal labor during planting, harvest, and construction projects. Men handle heavier labor, infrastructure maintenance, and tool making, yet also participate in ritual preparation and cooperative tasks. Children assist adults according to their capabilities, learning skills, and social norms. Intergenerational cooperation continues to underpin continuity, stability, and cohesion. Customary norms, increasingly reinforced through repeated behavior and social expectation, guide communal life. Fairness, reliability, and respect in labor and ritual activities are widely recognized. Disputes are resolved through mediation, consensus, and negotiation rather than coercion. Reputation becomes central to influence. Families known for consistent contribution and fairness gain subtle authority within and across settlements. Soft stratification ensures efficiency, social harmony, and the orderly completion of labor projects. The landscape itself plays a vital role in shaping organization. Hills serve as observation points, streams provide water for irrigation, and clearings act as communal hubs. Knowledge of these environmental features, transmitted across generations, informs labor, ritual, and travel. The environment becomes entwined with social and cultural identity, giving structure and continuity to community life. As interdependence between settlements grows, early social stratification consolidates. Influence is subtle based on skill, reliability, and contribution. Families and individuals, recognized for their competence, assume responsibility in communal decision-making and ritual activities. Reputation, ability, and consistent contribution become the currency of authority, ensuring projects are completed efficiently while maintaining harmony. Trade, ritual, and marriage collectively reinforce inter-settlement cohesion. The steady circulation of goods, ideas, and cultural practices, combined with repeated ritual participation, nurtures trust and shared identity. Communities come to perceive themselves not as isolated units, but as parts of a broader, interconnected regional network. This sense of collective belonging provides the foundation for early civic planning, centralized leadership, and proto-institutional organization. By this stage, early Latin communities have achieved informal but widely respected leadership based on competence, reliability, and fairness, coordination of labor for complex projects across multiple settlements, central gathering spaces for work, ritual, and inter-settlement interaction, standardized rituals reinforcing shared identity, integrated marriage networks transmitting skills and cultural practices, intergenerational knowledge transfer, soft social stratification guiding authority and responsibility, unwritten norms regulating cooperation, dispute resolution, and behavior, initial spatial organization of communal and functional areas, and subtle preparation for centralized governance in proto-institutional structures. These developments mark a profound and deliberate evolution, Communities retain autonomy, yet operate with increasing complexity, capable of coordinated labor, ritual, and social governance. Cultural continuity, trust, and reputation guide interactions. Environmental knowledge, repeated rituals, and communal spaces provide the foundation for early urban planning. Leadership and authority, although informal, begin to consolidate in ways that anticipate formal institutions. The stage is now set for the emergence of Rome's first centralized urban centers, political institutions, and organized civic life. In the next part of Rome, we will explore how these carefully nurtured social, cultural, and organizational foundations transform into more formalized leadership, structured institutions, and the beginnings of fully centralized urban life that will define early Rome. In this 20th and final part of our long, methodical journey through early Rome, we examine the culmination of centuries of gradual development, the emergence of centralized governance, the formalization of civic institutions, and the earliest steps towards structured urban life. Settlements along the Tiber River, which once functioned as loosely connected family clusters, now exhibit patterns of coordination, authority, and organization that foreshadow the city of Rome itself. Morning begins with familiar rhythms. Light gradually illuminates the terracotta-roofed huts and carefully maintained pathways. Families rise, tending livestock, drawing water, and preparing simple meals of grains, bread, and dairy. These routines, practiced over generations, form the enduring framework upon which social, cultural, and civic life has been built. The predictable repetition of daily tasks ensures stability and continuity, providing the fertile ground for more complex civic structures. By this stage, leadership has become centralized in a subtle yet tangible way. Elders and influential families who consistently demonstrated competence, fairness, and reliability are now recognized as authorities across multiple settlements. Their influence extends to coordinating labor, mediating disputes, organizing rituals, and planning communal projects. Leadership is still primarily consensus-based, but the accumulation of experience, reputation, and skill gives certain figures a level of authority that affects decisions across the region. Informal structures are gradually giving way to proto-institutions, setting the stage for more formal governance. Central gathering spaces, once simple clearings, have now evolved into defined civic centers. These areas are carefully maintained, with markers indicating zones for ritual, storage, and labor coordination. Paths leading to these centers are reinforced with stone or compacted earth, facilitating travel and the transport of goods. Within these spaces, families meet to plan projects, exchange knowledge, and participate in ritual activities. The repeated use and careful organization of these spaces solidify communal cohesion and lay the groundwork for urban planning. Coordinated labor has reached new levels of scale and sophistication. Communities now construct larger granaries, fortifications, roads, bridges, and drainage systems. Projects involve meticulous planning. Stones are quarried and shaped. Posts are carefully aligned. Mud and clay are prepared for construction, and soil is leveled with precision. These extended projects, sometimes lasting months, require the cooperation of multiple settlements. Repetition of coordinated work strengthens trust, builds social cohesion, and ensures that technical knowledge is transmitted across generations. Trade has become an even more crucial aspect of inter-settlement cohesion. Surplus grain, livestock, textiles, tools, and crafted items move along well-established routes. Observing one another's reliability and craftsmanship strengthens social bonds and reinforces trust. Incremental transmission of techniques and innovations continues, spreading standardized pottery forms, weaving patterns, and tool designs. Trade now functions not only as a means of exchanging goods, but as a conduit for cultural and technical continuity, promoting unity across the region. Ritual practices have become increasingly standardized and integrated. Seasonal ceremonies linked to planting, harvest, and transitions of the year are synchronized across multiple settlements. Families participate predictably, offering grains, crafted items, or symbolic tokens. Gestures, spoken prayers, and ceremonial sequences are now largely uniform, embedding shared cultural memory into community life. Ritual serves both spiritual and social purposes, reinforcing cohesion, hierarchy, and the authority of emerging leaders. Marriage practices continue to knit communities together. Unions arranged between distant families create networks of kinship and mutual obligation. Knowledge, skills, and customs are transmitted along these networks, integrating labor practices, agricultural techniques, and ritual knowledge across settlements. Children born into these networks acquire a sense of belonging that spans multiple households, internalizing norms, responsibilities, and cooperative behaviors essential for civic life. Children remain central to continuity. They assist in daily routines, observe elders, participate in communal labor, and attend rituals. Through repetition and observation, they acquire both practical skills and an understanding of social norms and cooperative behavior. Adolescents are familiar with labor coordination, ritual sequences, dispute resolution, and proto-governance practices. Intergenerational knowledge transfer ensures the survival of technical, social, and cultural practices crucial to the community's stability. Craftsmanship continues to advance incrementally. Pottery becomes more durable and uniform, wooden structures stronger and more precise, and tools more effective. Techniques are transmitted through observation, imitation, and instruction. Recognition of familiar forms fosters shared identity across settlements. These improvements enhance efficiency, durability, and the practical capability of the community, reinforcing interdependence and trust. Gender roles maintain continuity, but exhibit flexibility. Women oversee food preparation, textiles, and ritual duties, while also participating in labor during planting, harvest, or construction projects. Men focus on heavier labor, infrastructure, and tool-making, but also contribute to rituals and cooperative projects. Children assist according to ability, learning both skills and social norms. Cooperative intergenerational labor continues to underpin continuity, cohesion, and communal stability. Customary norms are further reinforced. Fairness, reliability, and respect govern labor, ritual, and dispute resolution. Families with consistent contributions gain influence across multiple settlements. Reputation and demonstrated skill become the primary currency of authority. These soft stratifications guide cooperation, ensuring efficiency while maintaining harmony. The physical environment continues to shape social organization. Hills, streams, and clearings provide natural points for observation, water access, and gathering. Knowledge of these features informs settlement planning, travel, and resource management. Over generations, communities internalize a deep understanding of the landscape, integrating it into their cultural, social, and civic practices. Proto-civic structures now emerge. Designated areas within settlements are increasingly specialized. Zones for ritual, storage, assembly, and labor. Paths are formalized, drainage is improved, and rudimentary planning of space begins. Central leaders coordinate projects across settlements, mediating disputes, planning construction, and overseeing resource distribution. Authority, although still informal, increasingly resembles centralized governance. Families recognize the legitimacy of these leaders, and consensus gives way to structured decision-making practices that anticipate future civic institutions. Trade, ritual, marriage, and labor coordination collectively strengthen inter-settlement cohesion. Communities perceive themselves as parts of an interconnected regional network rather than isolated units. Shared cultural practices, standardized labor techniques, and coordinated rituals create trust and a sense of collective identity. This collective consciousness supports early institutional organization and proto-urban planning. By this final stage, early Latin communities have achieved centralized but informal leadership based on skill, reliability, and fairness. Coordination of multi-settlement labor projects for infrastructure and storage. Defined civic centers for ritual, work, and inter-settlement meetings. Standardized and integrated rituals, reinforcing authority and cohesion. Kinship networks linking multiple settlements through marriage. Intergenerational knowledge transfer, securing continuity of skills and norms. Social stratification based on competence and contribution. Unwritten norms guiding behavior, cooperation, and dispute resolution. Early spatial organization of functional zones and preparation for formal governance of civic institutions and urban planning. These developments represent the culmination of centuries of quiet, patient progress. Communities retain autonomy yet operate with increasing coordination, cultural continuity, and emerging authority structures. Leadership, trust, reputation, and ritual integrate to form the first coherent civic system. Environmental knowledge, cooperative labor, and standardized practices provide the foundation for urbanization. Rome, though still modest in size, is poised to evolve into a centralized city with structured institutions, governance, and a cohesive social framework. In the next phase of Roman history, these foundations will give rise to formalized government, codified laws, public spaces, and early civic architecture. The deliberate, slow accumulation of knowledge, practice, and social cohesion will allow Rome to transition from a network of interdependent settlements into a singular, organized city-state, the beginning of the Rome that would ultimately dominate the Mediterranean world.